recycling, glass recycling, food and garden organics, and general rubbish. This will help reduce the amount of waste we send to landfill and improve the quality of recyclables in Victoria. Glass bottles and jars now go in your new glass recycling bin. Lids must be firmly attached. Loose lids go in your general rubbish bin. Steel tins, aluminium cans and foil, paper and cardboard, and plastic bottles and containers go in your mixed recycling bin. Food scraps and garden clippings go in your food and garden organics bin. You can use paper towels to wrap your food waste. Put your glass bottles and jars, food scraps, and mixed recycling in the bin loose, not in bags. Plastic bags and other items that can't be reused or recycled go in your general rubbish bin. This includes kitty litter, animal droppings, old textiles, and nappies. General rubbish should be bagged or wrapped. Update your recycling knowledge today. Learn what goes in each bin by visiting merri-bek.vic.gov.au/recycling-guide.
Hi, I'm Adam Pulford, Mayor at Merri-bek City Council, and today I'm at the Fawkner Leisure Centre. In April last year, we closed the doors here to make way for the first stage of a huge $36.8 million redevelopment. We listened to the community and we're upgrading the centre to make it modern and more accessible and sustainable. So come, let's check it out. I'm here in the shell of the new 50-metre outdoor pool. The pool will have 8 lanes and can be split into 2 with a unique float-up divider. It'll be the perfect spot to get your swim in or cool down when we reopen next summer. Our interactive water play area and beach entry pool is also taking shape. This is completely new to Fawkner Leisure Centre, and featuring a walk-in entry, this accessible and user-friendly space will surely become a family favourite. Now to the new gym and group fitness spaces. As you can see, construction is underway, ready to house the new 375 square metre gym floor, which is 100 square metres bigger than before, as well as 2 dedicated group fitness spaces. This is going to be a state-of-the-art facility designed to get more people in our community to be more active more often. With the centre set to reopen in time for next summer, we're excited to keep sharing with you updates as everything takes shape. So make sure you're following along as we bring the new Fawkner Leisure Centre to life.
Why did we decide to go all electric? The primary motivation was obviously to reduce our carbon footprint as a family, especially with a young son, 8-year-old, who's attending primary school and learning all about climate change and how we can do our bit in reducing the impact. Since purchasing this house, we've installed solar panels, and we've also converted all our appliances cooktop into induction cooktop. Removing the gas cooktop, we've installed the split systems and also the hot water heat pump. At the moment, we export most of our electricity that we produce on a sunny day, which is not a bad thing because we do get paid for that exporting the electricity. What I would recommend others thinking of going on this journey of making their home all electric is to do it. But you can take it one step at a time, there's no rush, and there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of government rebates that you can access as well. There's Merri-bek City Council website, there's Renew, there's also My Efficient Electric Home Facebook page where you can consult and talk to people that are on this journey.
The compost that we receive from Merri-bek Council that's made from the waste from our green bins, the food and organics waste, is a fantastic resource. A lot of carbon, a lot of organic matter that goes to building up the soil here, combined with the compost that we make ourselves. You know, a really brilliant resource for the garden, and it produces fantastic crops, as you can see behind me.
Well, obviously it's really important to compost food. If it's just going into the normal bin, then it's creating all these really bad greenhouse gases and contributing to climate change. But the benefit for community gardens is that we can't generate as much compost on our own, so we need the addition of council compost to help us grow vegetables and renew the soil, so we get the best productivity from the garden.
Sometimes when we get the compost, there's contaminants in it, like plastics, biodegradable bags. Some of them are not quite suitable for the process that the compost goes through. We have to then sort through the compost and pull them out, otherwise they're going to contaminate all our vegetables and the earth that we're trying to re-nourish with the compost.
Messages go around on Facebook saying, hey, there's zucchini or cucumbers in the basket at Pentridge, and they're gone in, you know, half an hour later. So we just like to share it with the community, because that's what it's about.
Hi, I'm Adam Pulford and I'm your newly elected Mayor at Merri-bek City Council. I was originally born in the Northern Territory, but since then I've made my home here in Merri-bek. I love our progressive, creative and diverse community. There's so many great places to visit. There's always something new to learn, something new to see, or something to do. In 2018, our council declared a climate emergency. The reality is that the climate crisis demands we reshape our cities to deal with the impacts of rising heat and more extreme weather events like flooding. But there's also opportunity. Imagine if we use this chance to make our streets greener, cooler and more livable and safe for everyone to get around in, no matter if you're walking, riding or driving. There's a lot of work for us to do together and I'm really excited about the next 12 months. So please get in touch with your ideas and I look forward to meeting you out in our community. We got it? Good.
I'm Penny and I am very passionate about inclusion. I'm also a mum of two beautiful girls and my connection to disability is that I have retinitis pigmentosa, which is a vision impairment where I have about 7% central vision. So with my disability, because I have such a small amount of sense.
Good evening. Can members of the gallery hear me? Great. Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery and to our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name's Councillor Adam Pulford and I'm the Mayor of Merri-bek City Council and the chairperson of tonight's council meeting. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's meeting. We're meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people. We wish to acknowledge them as traditional custodians of these lands and waterways and would like to pay our respects to their elders past and present, as well as to any other First Nations community members who contribute to the life of our city and community who are tuning in or with us here this evening. This council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Attendees are advised they'll be recorded during the meeting. A reminder that as councillors, we will act in accordance with the Councillor Code of Conduct, which will support the principles of leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. In the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. For members of the gallery and councillors attending in person, please follow the directions issued by council staff and security officers. Thanks everybody for your understanding and cooperation. Firstly, I'd like to introduce the councillors in attendance in person tonight. We have the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Lambros Tapanas.
Good evening, everyone.
We have Councillor Helen Davidson.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah.
Councillor Davidson's mic might not be working. Yeah. We'll get that fixed, hopefully. Yeah. So we also have Councillor Angelica Panopoulos.
Hey, everyone.
Councillor Mark Riley.
Good evening.
Councillor Oscar Yildiz.
Good evening.
Councillor Monica Hart.
Hello, everyone.
And Councillor Sue Bolton.
Hi, everybody.
Online, we have Councillor Helen Pavlidis.
Good evening.
And Councillor Anna-Olivia Carley-Hannon also has permission to join us online. I'd also like to note that today, Councillor James Conlon submitted his resignation, and that resignation is effective immediately. Also would like to introduce our CEO, Kathy Henderson, who's with us. We have members of our executive team and we have members of our governance team to help tonight run smoothly. Apologies. Are there any apologies from councillors for tonight's meeting? I'll move on to disclosures of conflicts of interest. Councillors, are there any conflicts of interest to declare on items on tonight's agenda? So, Councillor Pavlidis.
Thank you, and through you. I have a conflict in relation to 7.4, Amendment C196. I have family members who have property identified under the mapping.
Okay, thank you for declaring that conflict, Councillor Pavlidis. Now, I think the CEO would also like to declare a conflict.
Thank you. In caution, I'll declare a general conflict of interest for item 7.14. The matter related to the local government reform and the consultation, because I'm the LG Pro representative on the steering committee for that consultation. Thank you.
Thank you to the CEO. Cool. So on items where there's a conflict of interest, I'll remind the councillors and CEO, and they will excuse themselves from the meeting when those issues are being debated and decided on. We'll move on to item number 2, confirmation of minutes from previous meetings. Councillors, could I please have a motion for the confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held on the 10th of July, 2024? Councillor Yudis to move. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hart to second. All those in favour? I declare that carried. We'll now move on to acknowledgements and other matters. So there's up to 10 minutes available for councillors to acknowledge and recognise achievements of local individuals and organisations and raise matters considered important to council that are not already listed in the meeting agenda. Councillors, do you have any acknowledgements or other matters you'd like to raise? Councillor Yudis?
Yep. I just want to acknowledge the passing of Councillor Sarah Carter from the city of Merri-bek. I met Sarah back in 2008 when we first got elected to council. She unfortunately passed away.
Sorry, just if you can speak closer to the
Yep.
mic, the gallery is struggling.
I might just, sorry.
Sorry.
She passed away last week, and it's quite shocking to hear about this, and her funeral will be held in a couple of weeks' time. But I just want to acknowledge the incredible work and contributions Sarah has made to her community in Merri-bek, but also to local government. She served on a number of external committees and internal committees. Former councillor of Merri-bek, Sal Shanley, former councillor of Hume, Adam Atmaker, Sarah and I were quite close, and yeah, it's been quite sad to hear about her passing, and I just want to acknowledge her contribution to local government.
Thank you, Councillor Yudis. I believe Councillor Tapanos would also like to speak.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. I'll also like to make a brief contribution about Sarah Carter, who we lost last week. Sarah was a councillor, three-time mayor at Merri-bek City Council. Died suddenly, tragically, at 45 years of age in her apartment last week. A bit of a shock to the whole local government sector who knew Sarah, someone who was elected to council back in 2008, someone who was always very enthusiastic and a champion of local communities, the western suburbs in particular, and her council, someone who worked at Save the Children, which is an organisation that does development work overseas, and Sarah's job was to lead delegations, quite often to third world countries, and promote Australian foreign aid and the work they do to support children in third world countries. She certainly was a mover and a shaker and has made a significant contribution, and I guess her untimely death way too soon has sort of been a bit of a shock to many people who knew her. Like Councillor Yildiz and the other councillors, I think I met Sarah for the first time at Alga in 2008 when we first got elected, 2009 probably when we first went to the same conference, and ever since then she's always been someone that's taken an interest in being on the phone to discuss local council, both in the north and in the west of Melbourne and right across Victoria. Someone who was a proud member of the Australian Labor Party, and I feel would have had a very bright political career and future, and would have made a contribution beyond local government as well. So her passing is not just a loss to local government and Maribyrnong City Council, but a contribution that could have been made on other levels of government as well. So we all sort of mourn her loss, and her funeral is on Friday. Thank you. Vale, Sarah Carter.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Bolton, you wish to speak?
I wanted to talk about something totally different. First, I wanted to acknowledge a Fawkner local, Ridian Cowley, who is one of the returning Olympians to Merri-bek, who won a bronze medal for the inaugural marathon race walk. He's a fast, very super fast walker. You have to run to keep up with him. And, you know, Ridian was not just an Olympian, he's been very active in a lot of local community groups in Fawkner, in particular around food security, but also climate action as well. So certainly people in Fawkner are planning a welcome back, and I don't know how Merri-bek's other Olympians went, but Ridian's the one I know. Two other things I just wanted to make mention of is that I attended a meeting in Lygon Street, Brunswick, about 3 weeks ago. About 50 odd people packed into a small room about safety issues on Lygon Street. And one of the issues identified by two of the local businesses is the incredibly high number of motorbike accidents in that part of Lygon Street. And hopefully council will work hard on resolving some of the traffic safety issues in that area. And lastly, I just wanted to mention that it is really good that finally all 6 councils in the northern part of Melbourne have united to campaign to duplicate and extend the upfill line. It's been a long battle to get this campaign heard from the local community, which started protesting for this issue in late 2017 because, you know, once a train is 6 minutes late, it's cancelled at Coburg, terminated at Coburg, which means a cancellation for everyone in the north. So everyone in the north is treated as second-class citizens, basically, with public transport. So, yeah, I just wanted to make note of those things. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Yes, it was great to attend the launch of the Northern Councils Alliance campaign, calling for improved transport all across the north. And one of the focuses is the upfield investment needed in the upfield line. The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly was just on Friday, I attended the Recycling Roundtable on behalf of Merri-bek Council. It's an event held by the Federal Environment Minister and Visy, a recycling company, and the Sydney Morning Herald, the Age newspaper. It had the Federal Environment Minister there, it had members of industry there, and they wanted a local government representative to talk about our work on the curbside waste system. Our council's had high ambitions for a long time to get to being a zero waste city. So we were one of the first councils to adopt the 4 bin system here in Victoria, which is being mandated by the Victorian government. And I got to share our experience in that transition and community feedback and how the onus should be on the companies creating the products to deal with the waste rather than the people who are using them. Any other councillors wish to speak? We're probably quite close to the end of our 10 minutes. Right. Sorry, Councillor Pavlidis.
Sorry, I'll be very brief. I just want to recap or basically advise as to where we are with some issues that I have raised in the past. just to let everyone know that I've been advised that the terms of reference for all the advisory committees are now on the website. In relation to the alternative service arrangements, we do currently have one on open at the moment. The advice is similar to the Facebook posts. If you are on one of these arrangements, after 12 months, you need to request a review. So keep in mind when your 12-month time is up and ask for a review. The only other, in relation to the noms that I was going to put forward this month, they will now be in next month's agenda, specifically the procurement policy and consultants and the contracts that I was hoping, well, we were hoping to get done operationally. Now it doesn't appear to be the case. Just one other thing I would like minuted as well. I had asked in the last meeting as well about the Transport Advisory Committee and the minutes. The only one I think that's up there is one, if I'm not mistaken. Can we please have them put up as well too? And as per the last meeting, I also want everything I've mentioned minuted in the minutes as per Governance Rule 3.11.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlidis. So Councillor Tapanos has one last thing.
Very briefly, I also just wanted to mention that most of the council, I know the Mayor, Councillor Bolton, Councillor Hart, Councillor Riley, most of the council and I attended a forum organised by the Brunswick Residents Network and Walk on Merri-bek about Lygon Street, for Lygon Street to thrive and shine, and it was a well-attended forum with a lot of traders from Lygon Street. And now, traders from Lygon Street don't have a traders association, so sometimes their voice is not really heard. And this was a forum where they could come together and talk about traffic management, talk about economic development, talk about council issues, and it was a fantastic forum. And there will be a resolution that all the councillors are working on at the next council meeting. We were meant to have one today, but we would continue to work on that and continue to engage with Brunswick Residents Network and Walk on Merri-bek to get a resolution at the next meeting, so we can feed in all of that feedback and put it on the agenda formally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. I believe we've had the 10 minutes for that, so we'll move on to item 4, which is petitions. We don't have any petitions on the agenda, but I believe Councillor Tapanos has a petition.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Today I visited the John Faulkner Private Hospital, and the staff there had organised a discussion about the anti-violence campaign, the Vicky Cleary Day, and of course Phil Cleary was the guest speaker and spoke strongly and passionately. And there is a notice of motion at tonight's agenda, but the staff had organised a petition that they wanted to present here about the campaign and taking a strong stance against domestic violence. And the petition is of 135 signatures, which was just organised today by the staff members who attended this speech at the John Faulkner Private Hospital. It's really great to see that these kind of forums are occurring in workplaces in our community, and I hope that there will be more of these kind of forums into the future, because it's an important message that needs to be heard by everyone. Thank you. So if I can table that.
So do we have a motion for that petition to be received? Yeah, Councillor Riley to move, Councillor Pavlidis to second. All those in favour receiving the petition? I declare that carried. Before we move on to questions of council and community statements, I'll just welcome Councillor Carly Hannon. Councillor, could you please just test your mic and introduce yourself? It might be frozen actually. All right, we might do that when Councillor Carly Hannon isn't frozen. So next up is questions of council and community statements. The time provided, sorry, Councillor Pavlidis.
Sorry, through you, Mayor. I've just received a message saying I can hardly be heard. Is that correct?
Yeah, sorry. The gallery is struggling to hear you, and we can hear you in the chamber, but you're a bit quiet. Governance staff are trying to work with the team to boost your volume.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pavlidis. Yes, I said both. Yeah. So Yeah, comms team, if you're listening, that'd be great if you can boost the volume both in the chamber and in the gallery. Okay, so the time provided for questions and statements is 30 minutes, and the time can only be extended by another 30 minutes by resolution of council. If we do not have time to answer your question, it'll be taken on notice and responded to in writing. Priority is given to questions and statements that relate to matters listed in the agenda. If time allows, we'll get to the other questions and statements about items that aren't on the agenda. A maximum of 2 questions or statements in any combination is allowed per person, and questions and statements that relate to if you've registered to ask a question, when I invite you, you or your representative must state your name, your suburb, and then ask your question with preamble or background for up to 3 minutes. If you've registered to make a statement, when I invite you, you or your representative must state your name and suburb and make your statement without taking longer than 3 minutes. If you've submitted a second question or indicated you have a second statement, it may be deferred until all other persons who've submitted questions have asked their first question, or it might be dealt with written if we don't have time. A maximum of 3 questions will be heard on any one subject, and we'll proceed to the next topic. If time allows, we can return to the other ones. I'll either answer the question on behalf of council, invite another councillor to answer, or I'll ask the CEO or a council officer to respond. There'll be no response or discussion in relation to community statements. As detailed in the governance rules, questions or statements may be disallowed if they're defamatory, indecent, abusive, offensive, irrelevant, trivial, or objectionable in language or substance. If a response to your question is provided at tonight's meeting, there'll be no further formal response. However, council will action any commitments made in answering your question. A total of 14 questions were submitted prior to the start of tonight's meeting. All submitters have been invited to attend and ask their question. So I will open community question and statement time at 7:21. First up on item 7.1, our Year 3 Council Action Plan 4th Quarter Performance Report, we have Sharif Hassan. Sharif, you in? Yes, hi. Come forward and to the lectern. Hi, welcome, Sharif. So if you introduce yourself, your suburb, and yeah, if that's green.
Hi, everyone. Great. Hi, my name's Sharif Hassan. I'm from Coburg. So my dad and I have been running a small business called Half Moon Cafe. We've been in business for about 21 years now. Okay, after the past 6 to 7 years, we have seen, or we've had to deal with, a range of issues regarding substance abuse. Okay, this is mainly outside the Coburg Library. And it's just getting progressively worse. I could go into detail about how many times we basically see it on a daily. I've seen pretty much everything. I've seen in the past 2 months, we've seen public nudity, we've seen open urination, we've seen heads slammed into phone booths. Okay, we have seen assault. I have personally been assaulted outside my own workplace. So, sorry, apologies. Well, I'm kind of sick of having to constantly go up to my customers or whenever an incident occurs and say, sorry, these are just Coburg things. You know, this is just something that regularly happens in Coburg. Sorry, guys, you know, just Coburg things. And, you know, I've kind of gotten to the point after an incident that happened a week ago where someone was hurling abuse and threatening to kill someone repeatedly. I've just figured enough is enough. You know, we shouldn't have our staff come into our workplace being fearful of having to come into work. You know, it's not really what anyone would want to in their own workplace. All of the businesses within the Coburg or within Victoria Street Mall have had to deal with similar things. Okay, so we have to deal with it on a daily basis, as I said previously. So my question is regarding item 7.1 on your agenda this evening. What is council doing to support traders in the Victoria Street Mall in Coburg? Okay, and are councillors aware that what is currently in place just isn't working or not working well enough?
Thank you, Sharif, for your question, and I'm sorry to hear about the experience that you've been through and your staff as well. It is a the incidents in Coburg Mall have been raised with councillors at various times, and I've had a couple of residents raise them with me as well. Council has been doing some work, which I'll get our director to speak to, but you being here and telling us that it's still going on, even though we've done some work, means that we probably need to look at it a bit again. It's obviously a wicked issue because some of those people, it can be a difficult situation, but I understand that it's having an impact on you, your staff, and also residents as well. But I might just invite our new director of Place and Environment, Penny, to speak to some of the work that has been done. Penny.
Through you, Mayor, thank you, Sharif, very much for your question and for sharing that context. I am on day 3, so I'm not across everything that's been happening, but I can tell you that there have been a range of. Can you hear me?
Can you speak up a bit higher?
Can you hear me now?
I think it's. I think people outside can hear you, but it's people in the chamber are struggling to hear you.
So if I speak up, will I definitely? Yes, all right, I'll speak up in. All right, great. Yeah. Apologies, learning new tech. So there is a very close working relationship with the Coburg Traders Association, and there are a range of initiatives that go towards some of those safety issues that you raised, including support for the Trader Association to help with graffiti prevention measures, sort of periodic activations, and undertaking a range of safety and amenity activities around the mall, including library security and street cleansing. But I appreciate you've raised a range of other issues, and I can take on notice coming back to you with some more information, but also commit to having someone sit down with you to go through those issues in some more detail offline.
Great. All right. So thank you, Sharif, for your question. And I assume we have your details from you submitting your question. So we'll council officers will reach out.
Am I allowed to add one more thing?
So we do have a pretty jam-packed question time. Do you want to speak to just very briefly?
There was, I think about a month ago, there was also a stabbing in the mall.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty massive thing. And I don't want it to get, to the point where someone is going to lose their life over what is progressively getting worse in the mall.
Yeah, and we've had a council speak to it, we've had a director speak to this, we do need to move on, but thank you, Sharif. Yeah. So next up we have a question from Natalie Abud on arts and culture strategy. Natalie.
Evening. So the question relates to 7.1, which talks also to the Integrated Arts and Culture Strategy 2330. And I'll just give you the question first and then the rationale. The question is, will the council make a submission to the development of a new creative industry strategy? So that's the short version of the question, and the rationale is that the Victorian Government has asked for community feedback on the development of a new creative industry strategy, which is known as Creative State, which will inform the policies and investments that affect the arts and culture throughout Victoria for the next 3 years. So this is a great opportunity for Council to let the government know how much the arts matter to our city, which is evident in your strategy. But I'm also wondering, in the rationale, if you do make a submission, I hope that you will be able to highlight for their strategy the difference, which hopefully was highlighted in our strategy, between theatre and live music. So, I've been advocating from the school for live performance space because of how rich our theatre is at the school and how tiny our space is. But I also wanted to highlight, as in the hope that you can include it in your strategy, that, theatre as opposed to live music, it facilitates the arts for a different cohort, especially when there's no alcohol included, and also different cultural groups. So, going to see a play is not always the same as going to see a live band. So that's my question.
Thank you, Nat. Do you want to just remain here? I'll ask Director Community Eamon to respond. I understand you have a question on another item, so we'll do that after this.
Yeah, sure.
Through you, Mayor, thank you. And thanks, Natalie, for your question. So in short, yes, we are preparing a submission and I will take your comment about the different art forms and art practices that we have in Merri-bek on board and feed that back to the team, but they're preparing something which will draw heavily on the feedback we received through developing Council's art and culture strategy.
Cool, thank you.
And we might, given you're at the lectern, we'll go to your question on report 7.7 food system strategy.
Sure. So yeah, 7.7, the food system strategy, which you've been recommended to adopt this evening. I've got to try and make this question into one question, but it's kind of two questions. And it relates to the question I asked some time ago about you receiving a briefing from Ronnie regarding her work related to programs specifically in Glenroy about the that relate to the food system strategy. My question is, will you defer the food system strategy because deeper targeted consultation, including with Ronnie, needs to happen? So the rationale is that, as you know, you might not know, but I made a submission to the draft on the Conversations Merri-bek webpage regarding the consultation that happened before the draft. So I made it after the draft was adopted, but it was related to the piece of that report that talked about consultation, because once I've read that report, I noticed that the majority of the consultation sort of happened at an event at Ceres, and I think that Ceres is a very sort of niche audience, and it concerns me that after speaking to various people in the community about food systems, there's missed opportunities to connect the whole thing through the food system strategy. And what's happening is groups who are involved in growing food or providing food throughout the community are sort of acting outside of the food system strategy, and there's just deeper opportunities for the strategy to, I think, connect everybody who does anything to do with, you know, whether you're outside in the sun to grow a zucchini or whether you need a zucchini to eat and you don't have time to grow a zucchini, so you're buying it from, you know, the Faulkner Senior Sits on a Friday morning. I think there's deeper work that can happen after 7 years worth of that food system strategy.
Thank you, Nat. And so I might ask the Director of Community to respond.
Well, the question's about whether you'll defer, so you can't really respond until you talk to the motion, I guess.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you.
Matt.
Ronnie, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the first question.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So my understanding, Natalie, is that that has occurred. So through the Council's Food System Network, which I understand Ronnie's a part of, that's occurred. But if that's not your understanding, I'm happy to have a conversation.
Well, the councillors would know if they saw Ronnie here, probably with a briefing.
Yeah, I don't think Ronnie's briefed the councillor specifically, but absolutely has had impact and input, rather, into the development of the revised strategy.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So we'll go back to the questions that we have on Report 7.4, Amendment C196 more, Introduction of Special Building Overlay, its Decision Gateway 2, considering submissions and requests for a planning panel. So first up we have Merri-bek. Merri. And just Councillor Carly Hannon, welcome. Can you just test your mic just to make sure it's working?
Good evening.
Yes, great, thank you. And Councillor Pavlidis, do you want to?
Yep. Can I just please test my microphone? Can the gallery hear me now?
It's a bit better. Can the gallery hear, Councillor? It's still a bit faint in the gallery, so if in the chamber it's better, but tech team, if you could increase the volume of Councillor Pavlidis in the gallery, that would be great. Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, Merri,
Okay.
Go ahead.
So my name is Merri-bek and I'm from Coburg. I'm here to discuss or have some questions in relation to item 7.4 on the agenda. The updated amended map was first released in September 2023, and information sent to homeowners indicated that this was simply a planning matter. Firstly, the information provided to residents did not only fail to address vital issues such as decrease in property prices and increase in insurance premiums, the information provided failed to ensure that the vulnerable residents in our community are being well informed about this. The vulnerable people that I'm talking about are the people that are of non-English speaking background, elderly people who have no access to computers or don't know how to use computers, and access to family members that can explain this information to them. So my question to you is, why is Council rushing to have this amendment or this overlay to be decided on today when there has not been proper disclosure to residents in the community, especially those who have been affected? Furthermore, this decision has enormous effects on residents, and so we failed to understand why Council hasn't arranged for people to come out and visit the sites and make decisions on the sites, because us as residents, no one's knocked on our door and said, you know, your property is affected by this overlay. Have you had floods before? Talk to us. We haven't seen any tests being done. It's just this map that's just come out of nowhere. We've been told that it's the information came from, you know, satellite images and people complaining. So can we have some more information in relation to that, please?
Thank you, Mary. I'd like to refer that question on to the Director of Place and Environment, Penny Winsley.
Through you, Mayor, and thank you very much for the question. Mary, consultation is very important, and Council has spent considerable time consulting with residents and reviewing the map to make sure that the modelling has been done to a really high standard. So Council consulted with residents on this work on 3 separate occasions in 2021, 2023 and 2024, and has sent 4 separate sets of correspondence to impacted households. So this has included mailing letters and brochures to all affected properties, including language link assistance, and 2 of those letters, the one sent in 2021 and 2023, included a separate sheet in different languages, using Council's Conversations Merri-bek website to share maps and provide diverse ways for landowners to provide feedback in a range of sort of different formats. Providing access to technical reports for those who would want those things, which may not be the people you're talking about, but certainly language and phone numbers and access through verbal and face-to-face channels are probably important for those residents. And there were a number of face-to-face information sessions held across Council, as well as meetings with affected landowners who asked for meetings, and lots of over-the-counter inquiries. So there were sort of hundreds of inquiries that were responded to. There were interpreter services for incoming telephone calls as well. So there has been a huge amount of time and effort that has gone into this. I think I'm advised there were 6 in-person information sessions, 186 phone consultations, 77 meetings, 215 email responses, and 172 site visits were undertaken, site surveys were undertaken as well. So in terms of those specific questions you had around impacts, in terms of property values, our staff have engaged with other councils who have introduced this overlay in their councils, and their feedback has been that the research they did and sort of specialist property sort of advice was there was no impact on property prices that had been identified at this stage. In terms of insurance, it is tricky. This is a stormwater overlay rather than a flooding overlay, and that distinction is quite important in the way that insurance companies determine insurance premiums. So this relates specifically to storm risks rather than to the flooding risks that you have in waterways. So it's a much more difficult thing to sort of determine. And in terms of site inspections, for this kind of an overlay, it's not something that's normally required. The level of technical input from Melbourne Water and other sort of specialists is seen to be sufficient for this kind of mapping. Having said that, a lot of site surveys were done, so 172 over that period, including a number of those which were in response to residents requesting that their properties could be surveyed. To survey 12,000 properties would be an enormous cost for the sort of financial cost for the community to undertake that on every single property, but surveys were done on key sites and where people raised concerns that merited follow-up. So I hope that helps.
Can I respond to that?
Sorry, we don't have a back and forth, but this item will be debated a bit later on, where councillors can contribute to debate. Thank you, Mary. We now have, well, we can contribute to that in debate. We now have Vanessa Birch, who has 2 questions on this item.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Birch. I'm from Coburg, near Moreland Station. So in the updated amended map released in September 2023, it was only last year, after level crossing removals were finished, my house was added to the flood map. So that's a very recent change. On my street, every second house is affected and all are located on the same side of the street and at level. The water flow goes in and out in front of 5 houses, like it snakes in and out. In my objection, I requested an on-site inspection, as I believe the maps are inaccurate. I've never experienced flooding since I've owned my house, which is almost 20 years. The site inspection is scheduled for this Monday, the 19th of August. I have been told that the experts from Energy, hopefully I pronounced that right, needed to do this site inspection, and I'm glad that this is being done. However, these flood maps have discrepancies, and I request that the council delay the fast tracking until this map is verified for accuracy. Other councils have given more time for residents' concerns to be addressed. If this map is ready to go, why can't these discrepancies be explained prior to the SB02 being applied and before it is referred to the independent authority? That's the first question. I'll try and...
Oh, maybe we'll get the different directors who... Anyway, so we'll just get Director Penny to respond to the first question, then you can ask your second question.
Yep.
Through you, Mayor, thank you very much, Vanessa, for your question. And I understand you've had some conversations and some emails with the team about an earlier question that you asked about why the map had changed. So hopefully that was really clear. In terms of the timelines, this is not on a fast-track timeline. It's been a pretty lengthy process over a number of years. But I can absolutely confirm that if Council were to endorse this report this evening and refer the report to the planning panel, the outcomes of that site visit would all be referred on to the planning panel for consideration, so they would not be lost.
Thank you, Vanessa. And your second question?
Yeah, so I just wanted to reiterate, you say a number of years. My house was only added in September 2023, so it has not been a number of years. It's been a number of months. So the drainage improvement plan has not been updated as a result of major infrastructure projects such as the level crossing removals, the tram depot car park, or even the amended flood map from September 2023. Nor does it specify any upgrades that will reduce any stormwater flooding to my property. Why has the council not allocated funding to upgrade local stormwater infrastructure, even though the Energy report said that by implementing drainage improvement works, it could reduce the risk to low? And these flood maps are now impacting approximately 12,000 properties within Merri-bek.
So I'll ask the Director of City Infrastructure, Anita, to respond.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Vanessa, in relation to this question, our drainage asset management plan does guide how we go about renewing our drainage assets and carrying out maintenance works. Often our drainage renewal works are done as part of road reconstruction works, but we also have a drainage improvement program. And this program identifies priority locations where drainage upsize work can be done, such as from the engineer report that you referred to reduce stormwater impacts. And these locations are known as hotspots. And every year we have projects that address hotspots off that list. And that informs our annual budgeting and capital works program. In each of the last 2 years, we've committed a budget of about $1.6 million for drainage works, and we also have a $9 million road upgrade program, which includes drainage, as I mentioned. An example of a recently completed drainage upsizing project at a hotspot was at Foden Street in Brunswick West. This one was a $278,000 project to upgrade 146 metres of drainage pipes and associated infrastructure. So every year we have projects like that on our program, specifically addressing the sites that were identified in the engineer report.
Thank you, Vanessa, for your questions. Thank you to the Director. We have a final question on this item from Jana Favero. Jana.
Hi everyone, my name's Jana Favero and I'm from Coburg. And I'm asking my question acknowledging that I'm Wurundjeri land and that sovereignty was never ceded. My question is also in relation to agenda item 7.4. As way of context, our house was also added to the mapping in September last year, so I do share some of the concerns of the previous question. We were actually overseas at that time and then I was travelling for work during the consultation, so we've only received one letter advising us. And while I would fit in the category, English is my first language and I consider myself quite able of reading letters, I found the letter really confusing and also didn't understand the ramifications until I really started looking into it more closely. And excuse if there's my ignorance, I'm not a stormwater mapping expert, but I have tried to upskill in the past few weeks. We live opposite where the level crossing removal project has been done. We're opposite the train station at Moreland Station. And while there have been a large number of benefits of that infrastructure project, I can tell you that ever since that level crossing removal project has been undertaken, the stormwater absolutely runs off, especially the area where the platform is at Moreland Station. My understanding is that Council did receive funding from LXRP, from Level Crossing Removal Project, to have upgrades to the stormwater drainage there, but since then the water is absolutely pooled. We, and along with other neighbours, have sort of raised a lot of issues with LXRP at the time and then with the handover to Council about the level of water that has been pooling on adjacent streets. I acknowledge that there has been some construction work that's been done to try and level the swale, but that does acknowledge that there has been an issue with the runoff of water. It goes into the streets. Apart from kids in the street being really happy with giant puddles, it does feel now that with the level of complaints that have been raised from residents that there is a conflation of a lack of stormwater drainage and a lack of appropriate investment in infrastructure with the stormwater mapping that has happened. So my question is, has there been funding, and what funding has gone from the level crossing removal project money from Council into specifically addressing the upgrades to infrastructure and stormwater mapping specifically around Moreland Station since the project completed?
Thank you, Jana. I'll ask our Director of City Infrastructure, Anita Kerno, to respond.
Thanks, Mayor, and through you. Jana, no funds were received by Council for drainage works as part of the Bell to Moreland level crossing removal project. However, this state government level crossing removal project had drainage works included within the rail corridor. Melbourne Water, acting in its role as the Floodplain Management Authority, gave advice to the level crossing removal project for managing stormwater risk. Council officers are aware that Melbourne Water's advice was for the level crossing removal project not to worsen any existing stormwater impacts. During the preparation of the stormwater map for the amendment, Council's mapping experts reviewed information about the level crossing removal project and found that the project had negligible impact on stormwater overland flows in drainage areas managed by the council. And for this reason, the priorities that are set out in our drainage improvement plan haven't changed at this point in time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jana. That's all the questions we have on agenda items. So we'll move it to questions we received not on agenda items. I think we're going to need an extension of time. So Councillor Panopoulos to move, Councillor Bolton to second. All those in favour of extending question time by 30 minutes? I declare that passed. So first up we have Kenna Morrison, who has a question on the future of the gravel walking path between 170 The Avenue and Merri Creek.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Kenna Morrison and also a candidate for the Pentridge Ward in the upcoming elections. I enjoy walking my two little dogs on the gravel path along Merri Creek between Moreland Road and the Harding Street Bridge, where there's dramatically fewer bikes because they're on the sealed path that's moved across to the eastern side of the creek at that section. And I've noticed, walking along there, I've noticed the development notices in relation to 170 The Avenue. And by the way, thanks for putting the notices there on the footpath, not just on the street. I understand that any objections to this development close tomorrow. And as I read the planning application, it seems that the property boundary of 170 The Avenue extends across to the middle of the creek. This obviously raises concerns about the future of the path. I'd like to think that the future of this path is secure and that I don't need to lodge a formal objection. So can you please tell me what measures and plans the council has in place to preserve and protect this delightful gravel walking path?
Thank you, Kenna. I'll ask the Director of Place and Environment, Penny Winslade, to speak to that.
Through you, Mayor, and thank you, Kenna, very much for this question, which is a great opportunity to clarify an issue that's been causing some concern and confusion in the community. Just firstly, I want to confirm that there is no proposal to erect a fence across or otherwise block or remove the pathway that currently exists along the Merri Creek through the land that's on the side of 170 The Avenue. The issue has actually arisen because there's a drafting error in the planning application. So, sorry, you can't hear me, can you? The issue's arisen because there's a drafting error in the planning application, in the permit application. So the applicant has confirmed that this is an error and it shows a new boundary fence that sort of extends through to the creek, and the error will be corrected. And some further information to confirm relating to is that there was a previous planning permit that Council issued back in 2016. And in that permit, Council negotiated a legal agreement for the transfer to Council and the rehabilitation of a portion of the eastern part of that land, including the creek embankment and the pathway that you're talking about. So that land is actually already zoned PPRZ, so that's public park and recreation zone purposes, so it can't be used for any other purpose. So hopefully that clarifies. Thank you for raising the question, and hopefully that clarifies.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kenna. We'll take the next two questions together and provide a combined answer because they're on similar issues. And so I'll invite Andrea Bunting up first and then Nick McClellan to ask their questions. So Andrea.
Thank you, councillors. I was hoping you'd invite Nick first because he had more of an introduction.
Oh, we can swap if you want.
It's all right.
Okay.
I'm here. Andrea Bunting, walk on Merri-bek. I live in Brunswick. I just quickly want to acknowledge the great work that James Conlon has given to active transport over the last 4 years. So on July 25th, Brunswick Residents Network and Walk on Merri-bek held a very successful community forum on Lygon Street issues with about 50 people attended, and we spoke to about 100 traders beforehand about the concerns they had with Lygon Street, and Brunswick Residents Network have done a survey. And Brunswick Residents Network are shortly preparing a report to present to you on the findings. I'm just going to speak about one issue which concerns me, which is road safety. So Lygon Street, as we know, is a real hotspot for vulnerable road users. About 1 in every 10 serious pedestrian injuries for the whole of Merri-bek occurs on Lygon Street, Brunswick, 1 in 10. And it's a similar 1 in 10 for cyclists and motorcyclists. So it's an area that really needs a lot of attention. Councillor Bolton has spoken about the motorcycle and cyclists also losing control. 8 motorcyclists have been injured in the last 12 months of data at one location. Needs urgent action. But I would like to talk particularly about pedestrian safety. So we hope that Council will do a report and shed some light on why Lygon Street has so many pedestrians being injured, particularly at night time, and then report back to the community on what actions they'll be taking to address this. Lygon Street is far more hazardous for pedestrians than most comparable activity centres. So in the past 5 years, there's been 9 serious injuries on Lygon Street, and the comparable length of Sydney Road has had 1. And it's just as busy, just as many bars and restaurants. Why is Lygon Street, where there is so much pedestrian trauma? And nighttime ones are particularly bad on Lygon Street. I actually compared Lygon Street using the official crash data, injury data, and we are one of the worst dining strips in the whole of Victoria. And that's pretty awful. So my question is to Council, and now Councillor Lambros-Tapanos has mentioned something about this, so very excited. That you are asking for a report. I would hope that it would include road safety issues on Lygon Street, particularly looking at pedestrian safety and particularly looking at what's happening at night time. And my time is up. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. So I'll invite Nick to ask his question as well, and then we'll get a response.
Do I stay in?
You're welcome to. Up to you, whether you want to sit down or support Nick.
He doesn't need my support.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks to the Mayor. My name's Nick McClellan. I live in Brunswick, and with the Brunswick Residents Network, as mentioned by a number of councillors and by Andrea, we had a really successful public meeting, and we want to acknowledge the presence of the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, a number of councillors, council staff, the local MP. Anyone would think it was an election year. Andrew's mentioned one of the 3 key themes that came out around traffic and traffic safety, pedestrians and so on. As mentioned, as well as the public meeting, we've been talking with traders and small businesses up and down Lygon Street. It's notable there's no Traders Association, unlike Sydney Road and Coburg. And that's a fundamental flaw, and there's a question about how proactive council is in engaging with people working in Lygon Street, given it is actually a council road, not a Vic Roads road. We're preparing a report that collates the things raised at the public meeting, our discussions with the traders, and a short online survey that we've done since the public meeting, and that'll be prepared. We're hoping to get it to you next week or so. We'll come to councillors and to council staff. I think the message that Andrea raised about the commitment to follow through on this is important, given there's about to be a change in the governance of council. As well as the traffic and transport, I'll just flag 2 core areas that were raised in the discussion so far. As I say, you'll get a full written report soon. One was about issues of amenity and attractiveness, a great concern by Lygon Street traders that people are being driven away. it's raised issues around greening Lygon Street, around graffiti and tagging, around terrible footpaths, problems about outdoor seating and so on. Related to that, though, is a series of concerns about council communications, or lack thereof, and bureaucracy. A number of traders at the meeting and in subsequent discussions showed striking lack of knowledge about really good council programs, like on graffiti removal and murals and so on. I mean, with a number of people who spoke at the meeting really didn't know that council had these sort of programs. And that raises questions about what sort of outreach is going on to traders that don't have an association, like the Sydney Road Traders Association. And there were concerns about cost of applying for certain services, about outdoor dining post-COVID and things like that. So there's a whole range of issues that we're collating the information. We'll submit it formally. I'm pleased to hear the commitment earlier on in the evening that there'll be a resolution coming up, but we think it needs broader than that. We'd hope to have opportunities to meet with council staff for some proactive follow-through, because it's clear there's a lot of concern about this from both residents, traders and small businesses in the area. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew and Nick, for your questions. And thank you for organising the forum that so many of us attended. It was a packed out room and it was a good conversation. I'll just speak briefly to your point on traders, and then I'll refer to the Director of City Infrastructure for your question about safety, Andrea. Yes, I think having traders in the room there was great. And I think you could see a thirst from the traders that they could be working together on advocating to council and other bodies. So I've sent them information about what are the possibilities for them to set up a traders association. One of the traders offered to host a meeting of traders, and I'm happy to attend that. I'm sure other councils would be happy to attend, and council staff in the economic development team have said they're happy to attend as well, to kind of talk about the options for traders to formally organise and associate together. Yes, so that offer's there, and we've reached out to traders to talk about that. Specifically on the safety issues, I think I'll refer to Director of City Infrastructure to speak to those.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you both, Andrea and Nick, for your questions. And obviously, this forum was a really significant event, and as we've already heard, both councillors and council officers attended that forum. It was noted just the number of issues that the community raised and were concerned about. And some of these issues can be addressed by council, and obviously there's always resourcing questions, but certainly some can be addressed readily. Others will require advocacy to the state government for funding and implementation. Whilst it is a local road, we do have, with trams on it, some additional obligations in terms of the state's part of that infrastructure. I do look forward to receiving the report that you mentioned, Nick, and discussing its contents with both the Brunswick Residents Network and Walk on Merri-bek, and the officers commit to doing that with you. I think that would be terrific. We will be preparing a report to Council for consideration in the March 2025 Council meeting, and that will consider the road safety matters that you raised, Andrea, and particularly will ensure that analysis of crash statistics. You've already done a lot, obviously, but we'll also ensure that we put our eye to those, the urban design issues and the economic issues on Lygon Street corridor. And we'll also account for your feedback on the communication about the services that are available to local traders and make sure that that information is readily available. The report will consider resourcing and funding requirements and potential timeframes for any implementation, along with potential advocacy opportunities. So that is a commitment that we have made.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
We still have a number of questions to get through, so we'll keep going. Next up, we have Tony Rosios, who has 2 questions. Tony. So Tony, if you ask your first question, we'll get a response to that, and then we'll ask your second question.
I need to press this door, or you can hear me?
As long as it's green, we should be able to.
Okay. So my question relates to a motion that was passed a few meetings ago, whereby a recommendation to increase the rates for investment properties, which was going to be an avenue to decrease the house prices, which was passed. My concerns, which was hotly debated, yet passed. Yet, if we look at the current situation, cost of living and housing affordability is probably the biggest problem this Australian generation faces. And you can only imagine what's going to happen with the next generation. We see yesterday through an article published, since the Labor government came into power, we've had 1.5 million migrants enter the country. We've had building companies go bankrupt, 3,000 in Victoria. There's going to be a significant house shortage. So I'm not too sure the impact that doubling the rates of investment properties is actually going to be a solid recourse. Can we be a little bit bold and look at the amount of migration that we've had, and awful migration as long as it's sustainable and we can actually house the people coming over? Foreign ownership, I think, is a massive concern with people owning property that don't actually live in the country. Would it be worth thinking and being a little bit bold whereby maybe we raise that, because your article got quite a bit of media, maybe we cap foreign ownership and those houses can become available to Australians. We've got the highest land per capita in the world from a land mass perspective, and the 2030 plan continues to have high density living, which is only going to cause bike accidents, congestion in streets, and I don't think that's a long-term solution. So really interested in the council's feedback, and the big ticket item again about foreign ownership may go a long way into resolving problems.
Thank you, Tony, for your question. I'll ask the Director of...
Sorry, Sean, you've been quite supportive in your pamphlet that you've distributed.
Director of Community to respond, yeah.
Thanks, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Tony, for your question. So the question of migration, Council have a long history of supporting immigrants in this community and refugees as well, so really strong history. In terms of housing, Council has a role as a planning authority in approving housing and levers in terms of attracting investment in development and more housing, but also some levers in terms of advocacy to the state government and federal government in terms of investment that enables housing. And of course, more housing brings jobs and secure housing for people. So that's the key thing that Council are doing with housing is through our planning scheme, but also advocating hard to other levels of government, and of course also partnering with organisations that deliver social and affordable housing.
We can't accommodate it, Dermot. You're not answering the question, sorry, respectfully. We've got housing, we've got people sleeping on the streets in Coburg and in front of shopping centres, the numbers increasing like absolute no tomorrow, right? We don't have the housing stock.
Yeah. So, Tony, we won't have a back and forth. That's not how this works. But I understand you do have a second question that you'd like to ask.
Okay. The second question, and I'm quite passionate about this topic, and I've received the Swinburne report about 5G. So we're seeing a significant amount of 5G towers continually being erected on top of near schools, on top of shopping centres, in high traffic areas. There's a considerable amount of literature that's been published, and the effects of EMF, low radiation and high radiation between the band that's appropriate for 5G. There's some serious concerns, and understand it's all about increasing the speed of internet, which with all this 5G, I actually haven't seen an increase in internet. What's the council's position from a responsibility and a health perspective that it's not causing harm to nature, humans, and I think with a lack of knowledge and lack of knowledge with the residents, what can we do to really bring that at the forefront and really understand the impacts? Because I'm highly concerned with the literature and the reports that are being shared. There's a current submission, Submission 501 with the Australian Parliament that hosts a whole raft of concerns about 5G, and there's talks now about going to 6G, so I'm seriously concerned.
Thank you, Tony, for your question. I'll ask our Director of Place and Environment, Penny Winslade, to speak to that.
Through you, Mayor, and thank you, Tony, very much for your question. As you've indicated, telecommunications are a federal government responsibility, hence submissions to the federal government. So council doesn't have a role in the operational management or the regulation of telecoms infrastructure, including the 5G towers. So questions about sort of regulation and those sorts of approaches would be better directed towards the relevant federal agency. In terms of council's role, our role, we have two roles that can come into play in relation to 5G towers. One is in a planning sense as the responsible authority within the planning scheme. We have a responsibility, we can be required to approve a permit application on a property, and so we have a role to review that. We can only do that within the remit of the planning scheme and within what it allows. So that's our first role. Our second role is very occasionally we might lease land where there might be an application for this kind of infrastructure to be included on it. And whenever that occurred, any proposal would be subject to a full public notice process. In terms of safety data and exposure limits, obviously council's not the lead in this space. Having said that, council did commission its own technical study back in 2021. You're probably familiar with
report,
it. Yeah. So that was carried out by researchers from Swinburne University who are expert biophysicists, and that study concluded that 5G doesn't present any harmful effects on living things in the environment. So that's the advice that council is currently operating on. So I hope that that gives an answer to your question.
I'd like to ask further, but unfortunately we can't. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony, for your questions. Now, I understand we had a number of other questions submitted, but we don't seem to have the people who have submitted them in attendance tonight. But I'd like to invite Nick Dolby to make a statement on item 8, notice of motion 8.1.
Hello, Nick Dolby, West Brunswick. 8.1, it is a notice of motion asking for a report on family violence. I'd like to briefly talk upon family or domestic violence. We know that it can occur in all sorts of families, but we also know that the vast majority of it is men on women violence. And I know that there are councillors here, for instance, Mark Riley, who supports groups that are trying to change male culture. This is the long-term solution to family domestic violence. But tonight, tomorrow, Friday, there are going to be women and children who need help from the authorities, including this council. And I believe that Councillor Helen Davidson's notice of motion will assist in us delivering that help, and I commend it to all the councillors present. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for your statement. That brings us to the end of the questions and statements. So we'll move on to the next. Yeah, sorry, let me just get there, Councillor Bolton. At 13 past 8, that concludes public question time. Item 6, we have item 6 on the agenda. It's an item to be tabled under the Local Government Act 2020. So this item on the agenda involves the tabling of the arbiter's determination and statement of reasons as required by the Local Government Act. Since this item is only for tabling and recording in minutes, we'll consider it tabled and we'll move on to council reports. So Councillor Bolton, you had a proposal?
I'd like to propose that we move 7.4 up in the agenda. Is there a few people here for that?
Yeah, generally agreed by council. Yep, great. Thanks. Okay, so Councillor Bolton seeks to move a motion. Which motion are you seeking to move?
So I circulated an alternative resolution earlier this afternoon.
Sorry, yes. Councillor Pavlidis.
Interest, so I will be leaving the meeting now. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, great. So, Councillor Pavlidis, sorry, do you want to just... No, she's gone. That's fine. We'll let Councillor Pavlidis know when that's resumed. Did you want to say something, Councillor Udis? So we're just...
Declare a conflict, I think. Yeah.
So briefly speak to the conflict.
There probably isn't a conflict, but I just want to there might be complications later on. I don't want to have to sit in front of anyone and have to explain myself. But there is a future development, just a property I want to develop, and I already have permits for that. It is in Pascoe Vale for my kids and for both my girls. And even though I've got the permits, the stormwater issue may impact those properties, maybe, but I've been told it won't. But in saying that, I'd rather declare a conflict.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Udis. So we'll invite you back into the meeting with Councillor Pavlidis once we've dealt with this item. So Councillor Bolton, to continue. So just which motion are you seeking to move?
So it is, no, it's not that one. It's the alternative resolution that was circulated this afternoon. Yeah, the second one there.
Okay, so it's on the screen. Councillor Carly Hannon, can you see that on the screen? If not, you can? Great, sorry. And that was circulated earlier today.
Yeah, earlier today. So for people who might be surprised, there's an alternative resolution. We'll sort of read out the rough content of the resolution. So I'm proposing in my resolution that the planning amendment C196 more around the stormwater flood mapping be deferred until next year. And this is in order for council to send a letter to owners whose properties have been added to the stormwater flood map, and further that this letter indicates that the property owner's property has been added. Actually, I'm reading the wrong version, I think. Sends a further letter to owners whose properties were proposed to be added to the stormwater flood map, which advises property owners they can request a site inspection if they are concerned there is a reason their property should not have been added to the map, and further ensures that the letter indicates how people can access this in other languages, but also with a phone contact for people who might have learning disabilities, literacy issues, cognitive disabilities, so that they can get a very clear English description of the meaning of being added to the flood map. My reason for moving this deferral is because I believe there are a lot of people who threw away the letters because they didn't understand what they meant. Or else, I mean, there's always some letters that go astray in the post, but also what this means is there are a lot of people who have no idea that their properties have even been added to a flood map, and some of the people who might be aware their properties have been added to a flood map probably don't realise that they were added to the...
So, Councillor Bolton, sorry, I wanted you to... we need to get a second if you want to start speaking to... Yeah. So...
I thought someone did second.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that step. That was my bad. Do we have a councillor wishing to second this amendment? Sorry, well, it's an alternative that seeks to defer. So, Councillor Hart to second. Sorry, Councillor Bolton, continue.
So I believe that a lot of people who even do know that their properties are on the flood map don't realise that the assessments were not based on a site investigation. They were based on desktop analysis, and that desktop analysis might be accurate for, I don't know what percentage, 80% or 70% or 60% of properties. So it might be accurate in the majority of situations, but I believe there are situations where it is not accurate, and some people don't realise they can ask for a site inspection to check the accuracy of being added to the flood map. I don't believe this planning amendment should go forward to a planning panel until we're sure that the maps are as accurate as possible. And I just think there are too many inaccuracies. We've already heard of some tonight, a street where every second property is on the flood map but not others. There's one example where it's possible that the flood map might have been based on the fact that a speed bump in the front of the property, which might have led to the wrong, the street being the flood level being miscalculated. I think there are too many errors, too many potential errors, and I would like to be sure, given the severe consequences for people who don't have a lot of money. I don't really care so much about super wealthy property owners, but there are a lot of ordinary working class people who, for whom their home is their only significant asset in their lives, and they are not able to afford incredibly high mortgage repayments as well as incredibly high insurance and they probably will get surprised by or find out their property is on a flood map when they get their insurance renewal for the first time. So I think there's no harm in council delaying things to get things as accurate and a community as well informed as possible before we proceed to the next stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Hart as seconder. Okay. Do we have any other councillors wishing to speak to this item? Councillor Panopoulos.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to speak against this deferral alternative motion and just kind of stay away from the substance of the thing, but why I don't think a deferral will actually make a substantive difference in some of the situations that we've heard this evening. So this is about, this deferral itself is about allowing the consideration of late submissions, but in fact that's what the officer recommendation actually has built into it in terms of waiting for when the planning panel or the first directions hearing of that planning panel will occur. So I just, the process that's been provided for in the officer's recommendation already does allow for late submissions. And in terms of accuracy and making sure that, our comms are easy to understand, and I think that that's something that we always need to continue to improve on. But this is about stormwater inundation. It's not about flooding from a waterway, so it's not actually a flood map. It's about a different issue that happens with drainage. And so I don't see a deferral as actually making a substantive difference to this process. This is Gateway 2. It goes to an independent planning panel. We already have expert advice. We're already doing the site visits. We can continue to do that and accept that as a late consideration, as a late submission. And so once that whole planning panel process is done, there'll be a Gateway 3. So I can understand where Councillor Bolton is coming from in moving this. However, I just don't practically actually see this as making a substantive difference because we're already collecting late submissions in a process that has been going on for a few years for the majority of residents, acknowledging, of course, that there was some of that later notification. But yeah, I just don't actually see this as making a substantial change to the whole process that's been outlined before us in something that really is a policy requirement and a risk management issue at the state government level that we're required to follow through on with this stormwater flood map updating as a responsible local government authority.
Thank you, Councillor Panopoulos. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Councillor Tapanas?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I'm torn about this one because I do think as a council we do need to progress these amendments, and it is no doubt in my mind that Merri-bek will end up with a flood mapping scheme, I guess, in the planning scheme, stormwater scheme in our planning scheme. So, but I'm hearing that there is still a lot of concern in the community and amongst our councillors here as well. So In those circumstances, I think a short deferral to early next year to enable some more consultation will probably not be detrimental to the progress of the amendment overall, which has been going for a number of years. So I'm more likely leaning towards supporting what's being proposed to defer this to early next year, but acknowledging that at some stage we do need to make the hard decisions, and that is implementing this into the planning scheme, and that will probably come, but it will come after it's been thoroughly considered by both this council, but also Panels Victoria, so people can be confident in what the final outcome will be, because it would go through an independent process as well as our own process. But if I'm hearing from the community that a deferral is requested, and that is the view of some councillors here, I'm happy to support that.
Thanks, Councillor Tapanos. I would just like to speak briefly against this item, and then we can go to you, Councillor Hart.
Thank you.
So essentially, we have a legal requirement as a council to update our stormwater map. This deals with a 1 in a 100-year weather event where there's really intense flooding. The purpose of this map is to help council planning officers decide how high a building should be built on certain blocks of land, and also where it should be on certain blocks of land. And I think it'll also relate to the permeability, how much water can actually get through on that site. It's not just all concrete. That's the purpose of this. It's a legal requirement. Council's been updating the stormwater map. So we started this process in 2018. There's been, I think, at least 3 rounds of consultation on it. As the director said earlier, other councils haven't experienced this affecting house prices, which is one of the concerns raised by residents, and it's an understandable concern. The other issue that people raise is about whether this impacts insurance premiums. Now, there can't be any general advice given on insurance because it depends on your provider, but typically insurance companies are worried about flooding that comes up from creeks, like inundation, rather than water that comes down from the sky. It's treated differently under many insurance policies. So people should speak to their insurance provider about it if their property is affected. But essentially, this is a legal requirement that we have to do because it'll change how buildings are built in our city. And as we know, we're in a climate crisis, and worsening climate change makes weather events worse and more likely. So, you know, the map has to be updated, and the context that we are operating within is also changing under climate change. So that's partly the reason why this map needs to be updated. Now, I understand Vanessa has a site visit booked next week, and so one of the concerns was whether this could be deferred till after that. Been assured by officers that the results of that site visit will be, if we do send it to a planning panel tonight, will be sent to that planning panel for consideration, just like the other submissions that we received through the last round of consultation. So it's the same process, no matter if we defer it tonight or not, in terms of how those submissions are, accepted and viewed and considered by the planning panel. So yeah, I just want to say I understand community concern. I hope I've tried to explain the situation. So I'm not going to support the deferral. All of the letters that we do send out do offer interpreter services, so I think it's important that we do recognise that. And it was really great to hear from council officers when people have come to us with concerns, like council officers described going out to people's houses, talking to somebody's kid who was translating for their parent who didn't speak English. We also have interpreters available that we use. So I think council's done a good job on this, but I understand, it is a change that people are worried about. But I've asked questions of officers and got confirmation, and I feel comfortable with sending this to the planning panel. So, Councillor Hart, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, I understand that this is about storm water mapping, and I don't disagree with what you have spoken about, Mayor, and what Councillor Panopoulos have spoken about in terms of, and I've been to all the briefings, so I understand to the best of my ability what this strategy is about and about what it means for the planning scheme and being able to look at the impact of developments, both for their own development that's occurring and the impact on, obviously, other properties nearby. I get all that. I think the central issue here is the question of the process. And for my mind, when I look at our items for agenda here, it talks about the fact that this report recommends Council requests the Minister for Planning to appoint an independent panel. It also recommends Council endorses the responses to submissions as set out in the attachment. And I also don't have a difficulty with how Council have responded to this. I think this is inevitable. Planning is so difficult. It is bureaucratic, it is legal spec. And we've heard community tonight talk about how difficult, even when you've got language, even when you've got the nous and you're well versed in things, you really struggle. And it takes a fair bit of time to start to unpack that. And sometimes it's because you've talked to a neighbour. I also understand why a lot of people throw letters away. It's just beyond you sometimes. So I think we have to understand that, knowing those difficulties, that sometimes it's inevitable that people don't understand impacts until things move along a bit. So I think we as Council need to have the flexibility to understand that, which is why I support the deferral motion tonight, and any way that can help the community get a better understanding, a better comfort. And I think it's the wrong process to simply say, look, we've got to keep going with this, and then you can sort of catch up and we'll, get it along to the panel. And, I have a lot of faith in processes, but I just don't think that's the way to go. I think the logical way is to defer that, allow this understanding, allow these site inspections if they're there, not to create untold anxiety in people, but I think to appease that anxiety that's there at the moment, because my hunch is that there'll be more people who come forward and say, I want mine assessed too. So what I'm really advocating for is that we allow that time and we allow that process so that we actually do honour the intent of what that motion's about. And that's not criticism of what the officers have done. I think they've done a fantastic job. It's really difficult work. It's equally difficult for the community to understand and have the comfort and the security that they need by what this process is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Do we have any other councillors wishing to speak? Councillor O'Reilly?
Mayor, look, I'm standing to speak to support not deferring, not supporting this, but to actually keep moving on this. This matter actually began before I was elected 8 years ago, and it actually got underway in around 2016, 17. So this has been going on for about 6 or 7 years. We haven't been rushing it, and I understand some people always come in at the late stages and have concerns, but really this is doing homeowners a favour. You would want to know that you're going to get inundated from the next huge downpour due to global warming and climate change. It's going to assist you to help address that, and I can tell you now, you will look the geese when you don't get this in place so you're actually telling people where the problems are, because if that happens over the summertime, which is likely to happen with the amount of 100-year floods, stormwater events happening much more frequently because of global warming, councillors are going to be the ones who are going to be blamed for delaying it. So we have to strike a balance here. We've taken 6 or 7 years, and I understand we can still address people's concerns with the panel time and get those information and get the site visits happening. I think we can do both. I don't think we should delay it further. Climate change is a huge problem. It's causing more and more stormwater events because of all the moisture getting up into the atmosphere and coming back down on us. We're going to get more of it. I don't think we're doing any of our residents any favour by obfuscating that or deferring it, because we need to actually deal with the problem and explain it. And I think councillors need to be bringing people in to council to get our officers to explain it to them. That's what you do. You shouldn't be bringing it into a council meeting. We should be getting them to have those answers. That's what you're getting your allowance for, folks, to get the interpreters involved and get people get the answers. And bringing it to the council chamber in an election year sort of makes me wonder what's going on.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Do we have any other councillors that wish to... Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. And I'll just speak briefly to this because I think Councillor Hart has really put together the issues quite well. I think we're hearing from the community that a short pause is needed, and sometimes when there's decisions like this that are coming before council to go off to a panel for a further report, it comes to a head in the community, and there's a lot of discussion and momentum, and this is what we're hearing now. So as we have responsibilities to the state government, we also have responsibilities to the residents, and part of that is to listen and say, well, there's no harm in stopping now and just saying, let's explain further, let's get out there and have some further discussions, particularly with residents who are concerned, who may have not read the brochures or not have been able to understand them due to being from a culturally diverse background or so forth. So a short pause does not do any harm here. I think pushing forward with something that has a bit of angst at this time would do more detriment to those people than to engage with them and bring them along and say, we're here, we are listening, and these are the submissions that will be accepted. It's not good process to then say, well, your submissions will be heard, but we're still pushing forward. A short pause does no harm, and that's why I'm supportive of Councillor Bolton and Councillor Hart's motion.
Great. Do we have any other councillors that wish to speak to this item? Yep, so Councillor Bolton, you're right of reply.
Firstly, I haven't heard any solid argument from the councillors who are opposed to deferral about what the problem is with deferring. You've made arguments about why this is needed, and I agree with those arguments. I think stormwater floods for two reasons. Obviously, the biggest reason is climate change, but also this is exacerbated by ageing, decrepit stormwater drains, which haven't been updated. And I know drainage is an expensive issue, so I can understand some of the issues there. But I think that we need our maps to be as accurate as possible before they go forward to the planning panel. That's why I'm moving a deferral, because there are people who don't even know they're on the flood map. If you look at the submissions on the council website, a lot of them are actually quite technical. So it indicates that a lot of the people who've been engaged with council are people who've got some technical knowledge and know-how and confidence, or maybe the resources to employ a private building surveyor or something. So they're not ordinary people who are ordinary working class people who are just trying to fathom what these letters mean. And you actually have to have a very high level of literacy skills in order to be able to understand the letters. So, so I think there is no problem with pausing this process so that when we send the maps to the panel and to embed in planning scheme, et cetera, things are as accurate as possible. And if we don't pause now, yeah, sure, council is still conducting some investigations. I gather the hearings about objections aren't happening until September, but someone today put in a submission and was told it was too late. So people who are only gradually discovering that their properties are on a stormwater flood map will be excluded from the process.
Councillor Bolton, if you
so
could wrap up.
I think we need to be safe. We need to have the maps as accurate as possible. So I'm not arguing
Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
reject the idea of a flood map. I think
Thank
I'm
you, Councillor
just
Bolton. So we'll
proposing
move
that
on
we
to the
have
vote.
accurate situation by deferral.
Yeah, well over your time. We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour of this motion? So we got might just call a division. So Councillor Bolton, Councillor Hart, Councillor Tapanos and Councillor Davidson. All those against? myself, Councillor Pulford, Councillor Riley, Councillor Panopoulos, and Councillor Carly Hannon. So that is 4 votes for and 4 votes against. I'm going to use my casting vote to vote for this. So that means that this has passed and there is a deferral till February next year. So I declare that motion carried. And we'll now move on to item 7.1. Yes, and we need to bring the other councillors back. Thank you, Councillor Hart. So Councillor Udis, and if someone could reach out to Councillor Pavlidis, an officer could text, perhaps? Thanks. So we're on to item 7.1, which is the Year 3 Council Action Plan, 4th Quarter Performance Report. Do I have a councillor wishing to move this motion? So I need somebody to move a motion. We welcome back Councillor Udis. I'll move this. So I'm going to move the officer recommendation. Do I have a seconder? We've got Councillor Riley. So, sorry, Councillor Bolton, if councillors in the gallery could step aside and speak to residents who are not disrupting the other residents who are trying to listen. I'm not sure. Councillor Bolton, if you want to speak to residents, just please take them aside so the other residents can continue to engage in the democratic process. So I'm moving item 7.1, the officer recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Riley. So I'll speak to this briefly. This is one of our cyclical reports. It updates the community and councillors on the work that council's done related to our council action plan. It's a very interesting read. We're on track with the vast majority of our actions, and I'm pleased to see that. Good work to the council officers. And I'll conclude my remarks there. Councillor Riley, is there anything you'd like to add? No? Is there any other councillor that wishes to speak to this item? We'll move to a vote. All those in favour? Okay, any against? Any abstentions? I declare that carried. We'll move on to item 7.2, naming at 33 Saxon Street, Brunswick, the voting poll results. Councillor Pavlidis, would you seek to move?
No, sorry, sir. Sorry, through you, Mayor, I need to depart. I've just had a message that I have to attend to family matters. So
Okay, I hope things are okay. Thank you, Councillor Pavlidis. Good night. Sorry, so we're on to 7.2. So Councillor Riley, you're on your feet. Yes, you're seeking to move. Councillor Tapanos to second. Councillor Riley.
Thanks. I want to move the officer report as appears in the agenda. This is the naming of 33 Saxon Street in Brunswick after an extended community consultation. The proposal is to endorse the name Bellum Bellum Place. This is going to be our new arts, part of our new arts precinct and community centre. It's just being built right next door to our Brunswick Aquatic and Gym Centre on Phoenix and Saxon Street. So it's rather exciting. A lot of investment going into this, and it'll be a great community facility for the community generally, but particularly for artists, whether you play music or whatever form of art you might express or want to create. So this is great. The Bellum Bellum Place is a Wurundjeri Wurrung, or Bellum Bellum is a Wurundjeri Wurrung word, and in this case it's meaning butterfly. And while there are some other great names in contention there, I think this fits really well with some of our efforts in opening up the public space there and other work we're doing with our Park Close to Home work, and as well as our tree canopy work and our nature plan. So I think this is a really suitable name for this new facility and new open space that we'll be getting right next to our baths. So it's really exciting work, and I thank all the community who participated and put up their preferences. It got a bit interesting in terms of how we analysed it, but basically this one sort of pipped them at the end. It's called Ballum Place. I'm really pleased that officers have taken the time to do this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Tapanos.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. I also would like to second this resolution to progress with Ballum Place. This is an exciting project and it needs a name. I think it needs a few names, to be honest. There's a lot of things in the precinct that could be named, including the open space and the building. So I look forward to sort of having those discussions, either as a community member or a councillor in the future. But Ballum Place, I think, is significant because it speaks to, it's a Woiwurrung word, and it speaks to the Indigenous theme that's occurring there with Black Dot Gallery. And place, I think, is really significant because that's what we're doing here. We're creating a place, and that means it's not just an arts hub or community hub for those who might work there or have a lease arrangements to be there, but it's really a destination, and we hope that our community will sort of come off Sydney Road whilst they're doing their shopping and walk into the space and enjoy the open areas and the gardens and the artwork that will be there and engage with it. So I think this has been a big investment from council going back more than 10 years ago when it made the decision to purchase this site, and many decisions through this chamber to come to this point. And I know that early next year, or hopefully before the year's out, we will be opening Ballum Place. To give it a name today is it's a landmark decision. I look forward to, as I'm sure the councillors here is and the community at large, attending the opening and seeing all the benefit that will come to the community because of this investment over many years. So I commend it to the council. And I'm really pleased that this process of enabling a second round has not only doubled the amount of votes and participation, but engaged a whole range of new demographics as well, new cohorts of people that were not engaged previously. And the result's the same, which is great, but the engagement has been really beneficial, and a lot more people know about the Land Place because of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this item? Councillor Hart.
I need to very simply just endorse and affirm what the other two speakers have said. I just really firmly believe that it is an important moment in terms of naming it and the significance of going back for engagement. I think, I don't know, there's a real strength in that, and it creates a whole sense of ownership and really moving forward into that space, into that place. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Okay, well, there was no speaker against, so no right of reply. We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. We're on to item 7.3, which is naming at the new park at 14 Frith Street in Brunswick. Councillor Riley, you're on your feet.
Yes, I'm very excited again to get up. And
so we just need
if I get a seconder, I'll happily speak to the officer recommendation.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, again, this is another piece of work that we'd already undertaken. We then extended it. It's on Frith Street in Brunswick, behind the old post office, or where now the Penny Black, I think, is the name of that venue. But there's a car park between Sydney Road and this site. It's a wonderful heritage building there with Art Deco building that we're keeping, and there'll be a lease. We'll be leasing that facility shortly. But this is a sort of an industrial park. Unfortunately, it's cost us much more than we originally expected because we've tried to keep the brickwork and the infrastructure there, and really unfortunate about that. But I think it'll be a great addition to the area, and we're proposing to call it Yabuk Park, which in this case means parakeet in Wurundjeri Woiwurrung language. So again, another celebration of the original people in this area. Again, celebrating the parakeets. I live only 500, 700 metres from this park, and the parakeets love my fruit trees, and I'm sure they're going to love this open park as well. once the trees start to get a bit sizable and the fruit and the flowers start appearing. So it's really exciting. Again, a great celebration of that. After renaming our city Merri-bek, the Wurundjeri Wurrung place a lot of store in us and look forward to the sort of contributions we make to that culture. And we can continue to sort of acknowledge that and learn from that and value the nature that we're creating in this new open space. This is one of our parks close from home. We're continually trying to find contributions from developers as the population increases, because we're trying to get properties within 400 metres of houses, but if you're in a medium density area, we're trying to get it within 300 metres of your property. So this is very important work. We need to do a lot more, but we've actually acquired quite a few parks in my time on council, so it's rather exciting to see this happening. The fact that it's bound by Frith Street, which is the main sort of frontage, but it's also bound by Lobb Street, Bath Street and Horvath Street, which are all wonderful British names to celebrate the boundaries of the park. So I really think having a Wurrung word for the name of Yabbup is a great way to sort of acknowledge that history and the history of the industrial site as well, because it was Fletcher Jones' factory for many, many years. So really exciting. Thanks.
Councillor Riley. Happy not to speak. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? So we'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. So we're on to item 7.5, which is the councillor.
Can I move this
Oh,
one?
okay, sorry. Yeah, so we're on to item 7.5, which is the. Yeah, sorry, I just lost my place in the agenda. State government consultation on plan for Victoria and draft housing targets. So it's our draft submission. So Councillor Panopoulos, you.
Yes, and I'll hope to have a seconder. I'd just like to move the motion that had both of the earlier amendments by Councillor Bolton and Councillor Hart sent around. So I think there should be an amalgamated alternative or amended one to
So
get
we'll
that
just
all
get
up
that
there.
projected on the screen, and we can see if you have a seconder. So it's item. Yes. So
Yeah.
I believe Councillor Panopoulos has incorporated the amendments, various amendments circulated by you two, Councillor Bolton and Councillor Hart.
We'll just make sure that it's all there.
Oh, so you're hoping to second? Sorry. Yeah, great. So Councillor Hart hopes to second. Yeah, so all good. So Councillor Panopoulos.
Thanks, Mayor. So yes, I'm happy to be moving this item with the amendments that were earlier circulated by Councillors Bolton and Hart. So I just want to firstly thank council officers for the time and effort that's gone into pulling this report together. So this report was written in response to the state government putting out their housing targets and the draft plan for Victoria. In this, we saw announcements made in the media about alleged housing capacities that councils had across Metro Melbourne and the regions, and also what was proclaimed to be a dramatic shake-up of housing and planning as we know it. So in this Plan for Victoria document, the state government produced 4 pillars to guide their draft. These are affordable housing and choice, equity and jobs, thriving and livable suburbs and towns, and sustainable environments and climate action. Whilst there are some commendable aspects to the information within those pillars, it's really clear to me, though, that there's a lot of room for both further information and room for improvement within the document itself. Our council's contribution to this is by saying that this is a good start, but we need more to ensure that we create housing and communities of the future. I'm really glad to see that Merri-bek is advocating for mandatory affordable housing in new builds and actually retaining and repairing our existing public housing stock. As our submission outlines, we need a better public transport network, especially a more efficient bus network, instead of the convoluted routes that currently exist. On the environmentally sustainable design front, we need the standards in the planning system to be dramatically increased. We need to be building the homes of the future that are comfortable for people to live in and that are future-proofed as well. Our submission makes this really, really clear, and actually this isn't something that we need a whole draft Plan for Victoria document to approve. 24 councillors have had a planning scheme amendment on environmentally sustainable design sitting on the planning minister's desk now for years. I truly believe that if the state government wanted to make some progress on this sustainable environments and climate action area, they could have just signed this thing and passed it years ago. So I'm also, though, really pleased to see, and this came up at one of our recent council meetings, around the work done around the shop front and floor space requirements in new builds. And I'm really pleased to see that this is also reflected in this report. Our council's done a lot of research and a lot of work to build up the evidence base for this, to make sure that people who live in Merri-bek can afford to live close to where they work and to incentivise people to stay within these neighbourhoods. So on the whole, I think that this is a really good submission that aims to address perhaps some of the lack of information contained within this plan for Victoria and draft housing targets, and I encourage councillors to vote in favour of this tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Panopoulos. Councillor Hart, seconder.
Thank you. I'm happy to second this, and I want to speak to all the amendments that formed part of the councillor officer's report, because they're amendments that I have put forward. I'll just make the observation that Councillor Riley made. It must be an election year when you find your own amendments being put forward by someone else. But
it was just to streamline the process, like really.
But let me address. I think the report that the officers have put together is a very, very good and a very, very solid report. One of the things that their report does is it challenges the targets that the Victorian government have put up for Merri-bek. And I just want to point out some of those targets. One of them, and excuse me for my glasses, one of them is a target of housing capacity here of 72,000 dwellings by 2051. Merri-bek's own housing capacity study has a capacity of 65,900. It also challenges part of the inclusion and the notion that we will have a lot of higher development as part of the suburban rail link at Fawkner. I mean, that proposal's really far, far away in the distance, so it makes some very, very valuable comments about that. It also makes comments about demand. Merri-bek's own planning is not around 72,000, it's around 42 to 48,000. My amendments speak largely to issues around affordable and social housing, which the report does address, and as Councillor Panopoulos rightly said, they talk about and they recommend minimum requirements around affordable and social housing, but they don't put a figure on what that should be. So taking Merri-bek's own figures, their figures state that the need for, by 2036, will be 21,678. But their figures also talk about that in affordable terms is between 7,000 and 10,000. That's a huge percentage. So the notion of a council putting 20% around affordable and social housing dwellings is very minimal. But I think we have to start to name, we have to start to advocate in terms of the need and we think is appropriate to attempt to address the need for social and affordable housing in Merri-bek. And it strengthens, I think, our Merri-bek position when we start to name what we advocate and believe those targets should minimally be. I also want to say that, the other part of that is that we need to look at what's happening with state government land and public housing. We had a development at Canyon where there was, it was state government land. They had 10% affordable housing on that property. So that's the rationale behind most of the amendments that I have put in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Councillor Bolton.
I definitely support the submission, and I in particular support the fact that council officers are saying that the number of dwellings the state government's requested us to provide permits for is not realistic. So I think there's some good explanation around that. We actually need realistic targets, and we obviously have a huge housing crisis. But I really, the amendment I was moving, which is now incorporated in the motion, is around land banking, because I think that was the critical bit that was missing, because really also in response to the person who spoke earlier during community question time, the housing crisis is nothing to do with migration. It's all about manipulation of the market and investors sitting on properties to jack up the prices so that they can make a killing. And, you know, there's many permits councils issued where the land has sat idle for years and years and years and years and years. So that's really a critical issue. Second thing I put in was the question that social and affordable housing has to be in perpetuity, because otherwise just what happens is that, you know, after a period of time, the property is sold and then it's just market rates. We actually need permanent social and affordable housing. That's why public housing is the only genuine form of affordable housing. And the last point is, maybe one of the words in my amendment hasn't properly been picked up. It's councils responded to state government saying require fewer car spaces for developments close to public transport to reduce costs, etc. And it says that council supports this action, which I think that's fine, providing that the public transport is adequate, i.e. that it is 7 days a week and 24 hours a day and with bus shelters. Because if the public transport isn't adequate, if it doesn't run on weekends or at nights, or it's very infrequent in the evenings, it's not a genuine way that people can move around the city, especially if you're a shift worker. So I did want to make that point. I think a word dropped out in that.
So, Councillor Bolton, I'm not. Are you suggesting an amendment?
I'll just send around something very quick. It's where council indicate in that subheading action 5 that council supports the action. That is, it was meant to be IE, that is, or something like that.
Okay, so should we look in your email that you sent her out? Do you want to speak?
This one here, the word that dropped out.
All right, so we're just going to make sure that that's covered.
Support this action, providing that transport in that location to run 7 days a week, 3 hours a day.
Okay, yeah, that's supportable.
Council supports this action first. This is point 5. Council, the way it's worded is because council's responding to a state government request. The council's indicating its support, but I think the support needs to be based on decent public transport.
All right, so hang on. So we need to technically do this as an amendment, but it seems like it's acceptable to the mover and the seconder.
Maybe council supports this action, providing transport in that location. Use that one word. Yep. Thanks.
Okay. And so that is acceptable to the mover and seconder? Great. Great, we've got that. So Councillor Bolton's finished speaking. So any other councillors wish to speak to this item?
I might speak
Councillor
briefly.
Tapanos?
Well, there's been a few speeches tonight. It's great that council's putting in a submission. I'm really supportive of that. And there's no doubt that we have a housing crisis. And there's a number of ways that we can start addressing the housing crisis. And the biggest way is it is a supply and demand issue, and we need more supply. However, when you build more housing, you also need to build the infrastructure. And whilst I sit here and I look at the state government wants us to have 72,000 more dwellings in the city, I really start getting concerned because I don't see an equal sort of emphasis on the infrastructure that is required to support that population. I don't know if our drainage, which we've spoken about so much today, can actually sustain that population, or our roads sustain that population. I think it's pretty evident that it can't. So whilst we are advocating for housing, we need to be holistic in our approach and also advocate for infrastructure which supports that housing. And I think that that needs to be quite clear to state government. We know that it's better to go up than it is to go out, but that doesn't mean that the infrastructure that's here can cope with 70,000 plus more residents. So this is a point that really needs to be emphasised. The other point, and I echo Councillor Hart's comment about affordable housing, the housing affordability issue does need to be addressed by the developers paying for more affordable housing. The only way you can do that is including it mandatory in a zone, what we call an inclusionary zone. So we say to developers, in every building of a certain size you build here, we expect you to have, let's say, 20% affordable housing, and that is a compulsory, mandatory requirement in the planning scheme. So what I would further like to see here is that the government also develops with council an affordable housing target for Merri-bek and each municipality, and then tells us how we're going to meet that and how can we put those targets in the planning scheme. So I think that broadly what I'm expressing here is captured there, but I just wanted to emphasise that I think these are serious issues that need real solution, and it's not just, okay, let's have 70,000 more dwellings. And in regards to car parking, it's not a solution to just say don't build car parking. Some people need to drive. And I'm supportive of the additional words from Councillor Bolton because I think it emphasises that we're happy to reduce it around activity centres where there is public transport. That's only a very small part of the city. And what we're seeing is every time we don't have car parking or a plan for car parking, because it doesn't need to be right underneath their apartment, it could be a green travel plan or other things, we are adding more and more congestion on our street. So there's a lot here.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos.
And I'm glad we're putting this submission and we're starting to tackle those issues.
Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We'll move to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. We're now on to item 7.6, engaging with small businesses in neighbourhood activity centres. So Councillor Davidson seeking to move. Can I just clarify what you're seeking to move?
I'm seeking to move the motion as it's read and also the inclusion of a point 4.
So that was emailed around earlier?
Which Councillor Tapanos had put.
Great. And you're happy to second? Councillor Yoder's happy to second. Councillor Davidson.
Yeah, so thank you. Through the Mayor, this motion looks to focus on support that's offered to local businesses in Merri-bek and to the ongoing programs of business development and support for neighbourhood activity centres. So neighbourhood activity centres are bigger than the neighbourhood strip. I'm also hopeful that through this motion, support is going to be offered to those smaller strips where businesses, a lot of councillors and residents have noticed many businesses closing their doors. These strips are vital for our connected community, for residents to shop locally and live locally. And I'm hoping that council can really have a strong impact through tangible actions by engaging with these smaller businesses and providing support, ideas, and as point 4 through Councillor Tapanos' request, through grants to support them to grow. And that might be in the form of saying, you know, it's a milk bar, you have the ability to have a coffee machine. Have you thought about having some tables and chairs out the front of your shop? We can provide a permit for you. So those sort of encouraging ideas about business growth and development, and also connecting local businesses together to form associations where they can also share and campaign and advocate for ideas that they have for their local shopping strip to encourage that growth and sustainability there. Yeah, so I'd like to thank Councillor Tapanoff and Councillor Yildiz for seconding this motion, and hopefully it's passed by councillors.
Thanks, Councillor Davison. Councillor Yildiz, the seconder.
Very quickly, our Economic Development Department was established way back in 2014, and our staff have been doing some incredible work, and I think the momentum's building where they're really branching out into such initiatives. But I do want to acknowledge the work they're doing, but anything that's going to invigorate business, anything that's going to support genuine outcomes for any business, I think is something that we need to acknowledge and support. It's a no-brainer.
Thanks, Councillor Yildiz. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Councillor Tapanoff.
Briefly, yesterday I was walking down Sydney Road. Today I was walking down Melville Road, and I noticed that there is an increasing amount of vacancies. And speaking to some traders, I think they're doing it really tough at the moment. The economy is at a knife's edge, so to speak. A lot of this is fueled by increased rents increases. And I know that it's broader than what we can do as a council, but during the COVID years, one of the really important things that this council did was act quickly in regards to parklets, which have been well received, and you see them throughout our community, and act quickly in regards to providing some financial assistance. Now they were meant to be one-offs in a COVID emergency, in a crisis. But what we're seeing here is another crisis for small businesses, an economic crisis, as inflation is going up, as rents are increasing, as bills are increasing. That cost of living, which we talk about as residents, is impacting very heavily for small businesses who also have rents, who also have electricity, who also have all of these outgoing. And I think that if we can find and research more ways in which we can support our local community shops, particularly in the smaller activity centres, the local activity centres, that would produce not just a benefit to them, but a benefit to the whole community. It's a benefit because we would have more shops, a variety of shops, but it's where we may have just had a vacant building attracting graffiti. So there's an amenity issue for the whole city. There's an economic development and a jobs argument for the whole city. And we as a council, I think, have a role to play, albeit a little one, providing a grant, supporting things like graffiti removal or a renewal of a parklet program. That could make the difference between a small business staying afloat or not. And I think we would be prudent to support this, and I look forward to what other action our economic development team can come up with to support our local businesses in a very challenging time. Yes, it's not the same challenge that we had in 2020 or 2021, nowhere near that, but the economy and the impact it's having on small businesses is a challenge now for them, and you see that. So we need to do something to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Bolton.
I'd like just to mention a couple of things. I'm not amending anything, but I mean, I think this is good that I think this arose from a notice of motion that Councillor Davidson put forward. So I'm not so much thinking about the grant side of things, but the streetscape improvements, which I understand council can only afford to do one a year, which is very, very slow and snail's pace. And some of the different areas have a certain neighbourhood activity centre or shopping strip, which is quite vibrant because there's been a bit of investment, like West Street shops in Hadfield. But then I gather when the investment went into West Street shops, East Street shops nosedived. And also I know in Fawkner that Bonwick Street's had a bit of investment in it, but really probably Major Road Shopping Centre, Tyson Street have really suffered from neglect. So it's really just sort of pointing out, and I'm sure there are other similar shopping centres in other parts of Merri-bek as well that are not necessarily in my ward. But I just think we probably do need to do a bit more thinking about all of the little shopping strips that are not the prime neighbourhood activity centres, but maybe haven't had the investment of the prime one in each particular area. That's it.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. On to item 7.7, which is Food System Strategy 2024-2027. Councillor Riley, you've got your hand up. Okay. So, Councillor, what do you think?
Move the officer recommendation.
Okay.
Thanks.
Is there a seconder for the officer recommendation? Okay, so Councillor Tapanos was second. We can check with your amendment a bit later. So, Councillor Riley.
I'm more than happy to include Councillor Bolton's amendment.
Okay, so this is the one that was circulated earlier? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Okay, so let's just, yeah, we've got it on the screen here. So it was circulated earlier. That amendment proposed by Councillor Bolton is acceptable to the mover and seconder of Councillor Riley, Councillor Tapanos. So the mover, Councillor Riley, please speak.
Thank you. Look, thanks to the office for this presentation. I just want to acknowledge former Mayor and Councillor and colleague Natalie Aboud, who helped really kick this off in my first term on council, or really added to that work. And I know Nat's bid tonight to try and defer this, but I actually think there's a way around it, Natalie, which is that we get on with the work and then the new council can actually consider it with the new council vision and council plan and work out how to include that and prioritise it in the budget for next year, because that will then set the train for the next 4 years. So I think there's a real opportunity to continue to build on that. In sort of addressing the sort of key features, Councillor Bolton wanted us to make sure that we didn't miss the food equity and security parts of the work, which is definitely in there. But it actually has been reframed, this version, from the original, where we're actually starting to include aspects of... I've just lost my notes, so just give me a second, sorry. I'm on the wrong report, would help. So we're looking at not just food security, but we're also looking at how we produce that locally and get some sustainable food production going. We are doing some work in that area. We need to try and look at other ways of contributing and supporting that. But connecting up food cultures, something we celebrate in our city a lot, and I think we can continue to do that and include First Nations in that work, learning on how to use natural and Indigenous species. But also a lot of education and capacity building so that communities can be taking control of their own food management, sharing food in the streets, developing the food economy across the whole of Merri-bek and in the region, as well as getting advocacy at state and federal levels, which we've moved motions in the last year about that, to get state and federal governments to activate their own food systems policies, because local governments are leading the way like they do and have done, and global warming and climate change was something that council started moving on in the 90s, and it's only taken a couple of decades for state and federal government to catch up. So this is great to see council doing this work, and thank the officers, and look forward to doing some more building on that and in the new council with the new after the election. So yeah, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Bolton, for your amendment. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Tapanos, the seconder.
I'm happy to pass on this one.
Councillor Bolton.
Yes, my amendment was really just to pick something up which council has voted on but wasn't in the actions, which was for council to do a feasibility study about looking at the accommodation needs of emergency relief organisations. And one of the reasons why this is important is because the emergency relief organisations that are not connected to churches or similar organisations struggle to have accommodation that they can organise food and other material aid distribution from. It seems that the ones that are connected to churches, because churches have halls, are in a better situation. I did actually just suddenly think of something else which was triggered when I read the report and I forgot to do an amendment about, which is the fact that there are probably not enough community gardens around Merri-bek. I think, and I know this is not a strategy which is about community gardens, it's about the whole breadth of urban agriculture and education in food growing and so forth. But it has been raised with me by community members that there aren't sufficient community gardens. I mean, the person who raised this with me was Brunswick. So that is certainly something which I think is something which hopefully we can look at through the prism of this strategy. But I certainly support moving forward with this and getting the community food hub off the ground. But I'm also really keen to see some sort of accommodation, however it comes about, to accommodate the emergency relief organisations that are 100% volunteer and run.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We'll move to a vote. All those in favour? And I declare that carried unanimously. We're on to item 7.8, which is Children, Young People and Families Plan 2021-2025, the implementation of Year 3 actions. Do I have a councillor wishing to move this item? Councillor Panopoulos? And Councillor Tapanos to second. Councillor Panopoulos.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, I'm quite happy to be speaking in favour of this report on the implementation of the Year 3 actions for the Children, Young People and Families Plan. And as always, the team in all three of those spaces have been incredibly busy and doing some really, really good work with young people and families across the community. So I think that there's a few infrastructure and refurbishment and expansion things to highlight, which are really important and will have a tangible impact on families and on young kids for years to come. And that includes the expansion of the Pascoe Community Centre Children's Room, extra maternal and child health consulting room there as well, and co-investment in the Derby Street Children's Centre and Oak Park Kinder, as well as the work that we are doing at Council to continue to progress the Brunswick Early Years Hub. In addition to that, our Youth Ambassadors program has been continuing in just a really fantastic way, and we heard from a bunch of our youth ambassadors recently at Council, and so it's really great to have those touch points so that we can see what they've been up to. In addition, there was something that was done for the first time this year as a pilot program, and that was around these youth community connectors. So we have the regular adult, in quotation marks, community connectors that their job is basically to work with their own communities, their own faith groups, and the connections that they have to help get council comms and messaging out in their own languages in a way that is easy for people to understand and can often help cut through some of the bureaucracy or the difficult language that people do encounter. And so this year we had the first pilot run of the same program but for young people from diverse backgrounds and diverse communities. And so I think that this is really special and shows a genuine commitment to, I guess, taking an intersectional approach to young people and children in this community. In addition, we have the Children's Reference Group, and we've started really making our way into engaging with school-aged kids about what they want to see in Merri-bek, which I think is just so important to be getting people at a really young age involved in what do councils do, how can we help people in their everyday lives. And so it plays a really important role in both the tangible outcomes, but also that civic education, which we know is vital for keeping people engaged with all levels of government, but specifically local government, as they go from being, young kids all the way out to their older years. So this is a really good implementation report. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Panopoulos. Councillor Tapanos.
I would be brief. It's a fantastic report, and you see so many actions that are listed here that have occurred. Quite often, as a councillor, you hear, "Oh, what does council do for me?" type of rhetoric in the community. And this report and the next one really emphasises to me what council is all about, and that is supporting and providing key services to our community for those most in need, particularly young families, children, right through from the core basics support services, maternal child health, through to providing support infrastructure, facilities, our Oxygen Youth programs, and all of the positive feedback and great programs that they've been around in supporting children's development right through from those early years, right through to being adults. And you see that we have a council here, and this doesn't happen everywhere, but focuses on all children from all levels. And we're looking to see how we can support teenagers, late teenagers, early teenagers, as well as young families in that first sort of, in the first years of the child's life. So it's a really holistic program, and there's a lot of actions and more to come. And this is sort of what council is about for me, and we need to look at providing more services and engaging with with young people and their families to see how this is changing over time and what other services we need to provide into the future. What's going to be used, what are their needs, and how council can fill the gaps quite often left by other levels of government. We are the level of government closest to the people sometimes. We are the level of government that people come to. And I think that we have a very strong role to play here, and we've been playing it very effectively. You see all the action there. So my final concluding comment was just a big congratulations to the youth ambassadors, the Oxygen, everyone involved, in all of our staff in these services. They do an amazing job.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Move on to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. Well, on to item 7.9, which is our Living and Ageing Well Year 4 report and evaluation. Do I have a councillor wishing to move this? Councillor Hart? And just, are you moving the officer rec? Yep. And did you want to, Councillor Davison to second? Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. I did notice a synchronicity of the fact that this report comes after the children, family, youth and family report. So I noticed the progression of the life paths. And I was also reflecting on the fact that just in a sense of age and time, we are in fact spend probably more of our time in life older than we do at each of those other points. Maybe not so much middle age, but certainly our period as a child and our period of youth. The period of being older can span probably from 55 onwards to 95 or 100. So it's a fair length of time. I also want to commend the energy of those who manage and run and work from council in the Living and Ageing Well program. I've never ceased to be amazed by their energy, their enthusiasm and passion and their skill. I also acknowledge my fellow councillors who share the older person's portfolio, which is Councillor Pavlidis and Councillor Tapanos. This report actually addresses the fourth year of the program, but it also is an evaluation, and I know how much that evaluation meant to the program. The fourth year report, I think, covers a lot of some of the activities, and I'm just going to go through those just briefly. I think we all remember over the year we've had the expo, we've had a lot of work that was put in around the seniors. There was a calendar presented around that time of the Seniors Festival. throughout the year, there's been so much of an emphasis, particularly around exercise programs, but the core of the Living and Ageing program is really about social cohesion and about reducing the isolation of people as they age. Also, I just want to mention, I guess, just in physical terms, we've had the exercise program, Coburg Seniors, we've had the ATC Cook, so there's also exercise equipment set up there. So we've had, I think, a whole sort of range. We've also had a focus around exercise programs, about putting through all the groups that we have, trying to connect people into more active programs and then linking them back into council programs. I think what I want to focus particularly on, though, is where not only the success of that, but where the future goes. And I think that's what's really exciting, because I think you see a whole way forward, which is really not just about programs, but it's about really older people coming together and a lot of advocacy and wanting to link into working with council around
Councillor Hahn, if you could come to your
pedestrian
conclusion.
safety. Sorry. I'll just be quickly. And around housing issues for older people and around communication issues. So I think the whole strength of this is where it's been, but where that whole program sees itself going in the future, which is that really active connection of older people, groups and council.
So thank you, Councillor Hart. We'll move on to the next
you.
speaker. So I think, was it Councillor Davidson? Sorry, Councillor Davidson was seconder. Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. And thank you for the tremendous work that you and the fellow portfolio councillors do in this area. And we hear you speak about this quite often, and it's really resonating. And I think that the results from this trial are testament to the significant impact that council can have in this space and should continue to have in this area. And it's something that we're going to have to look towards in the future, particularly where we have the state government intervening in this area and the role that council plays. And we're really sort of carving out our importance here through this report. And we can see the uptake in participants and how well it has resonated throughout the community. I know we had a gardening project that was inundated with calls, and we've been able to provide a limited number. I think 300 projects were delivered for gardening assistance. There were so many more that we could have done. I think the active area that we're encouraging more elderly people to maintain their active lifestyle is incredibly important, and there's so many studies that go towards longevity and maintaining independence in the home, and how important small exercises can be on a daily basis to support that notion of longevity for people within our community that are a bit are more elderly, or that might be a little bit more vulnerable in terms of their health. So this report is something that I think we need to build on, and that we can carry forward into the next council, where we look at increasing funding here, that we can say we have had tangible results. This is a primary focus of this council, and we want to spend more money in this particular area. So thank you for all the council officers' work and for councillors who have supported this all the way through their term.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Do any other councillor wish to speak to this item?
Briefly as well, and I won't echo what I said previously, but I just wanted to say that, again, services change all the time, and the cohort of senior people today would be very different to what they were 20 years ago, and very different to what they will be in the future. So an ongoing review of what we offer and where are the gaps and what we could do, and it could be the very small things that make all the difference, is really healthy for the council, and I'm really pleased that that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing that we had a call for more exercise equipment in parks for seniors, and that was delivered. We're seeing that we want to do things like the Seniors Expo, which probably wouldn't have been done in the past, and that was delivered and really successful. And I guess the one thing I'm most proud of, I guess, is this outdoor help for seniors that this council has delivered for the first time. Something that came from our council plan. Collectively, we said that this is important 4 years ago. It took some time, but the organisation responded really positively, and I really want to thank the staff for making this a reality, and we've seen it implemented the last 2 years, really successful. 300 garden projects delivered, and I know, and you know, and Council knows that we've expanded its funding for next year, and we're looking to see what more we can do to help people in their home. And it's exactly what a council should be doing, and I'm very proud of it, and I think we all are. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Any other councillors? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. Item 7.10 is Brunswick Mechanics Institute tender. I'm happy to move that. Is there a seconder? I'm happy to move the officer recommendation. Councillor Riley to second. So this is about the future of the Brunswick Mechanics Institute, a building on the corner of Glen Lyon and Sydney Road. I believe it's a state government-owned building that we have the lease over. For a number of years now, an arts organisation, Next Wave, has managed that facility for council and also based their organisation out of there. That contract is coming to an end in the middle of next year, and this tender is about the future of the institute beyond that time. Now, Next Wave is a multidisciplinary arts organisation, so they don't, they work across a range of art mediums, and that's a strength of the organisation. I have to say, over the course of this term, a number of artists and performers have approached councillors to talk about their want to use the Brunswick Mechanics Institute as a performance space and their frustration that it wasn't available for them to use. And, we don't have many other performance spaces equipped in our city for people to run amateur performances or dances or things like that. There's an action in our arts and culture strategy to seek creating a performance art space in the north of our city, but that's probably still some time away. So totally understand people's frustration about not being able to hire or use the Brunswick Mechanics Institute for local art performances. So those people may be interested that we're seeking, the officer recommendation is to award it to the same organisation. I want to say that there's some new energy in that organisation, and we've seen some changed approach already, which has been welcomed. And I think the other thing I wanted to note is the key performance indicators of the contract. The new contract covers access for the community to use Brunswick Mechanics Institute as a performance space. So it wasn't in the previous arrangement, which means we couldn't really hold the organisation to it, but this is something that they'll be kind of measured against and held to account to. But like I said, there is some new energy in that organisation, which feels like it is more open to that kind of use of the Brunswick Mechanics Institute as well. So I'm happy to support this. It's been a thorough tender process that the organisation's run through, but just wanted to note we'd heard some concerns from people in our community, and the definition of stupidity is to do the same thing twice.
Insanity.
Insanity or something is to do the same thing twice and expect a different outcome. But there are some differences this time, and key in that is the key performance indicators. So I'm comfortable with this and happy to move it. Councillor Riley, a seconder?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just speaking briefly to and adding to what you've said with community feedback, I know there are very few performance spaces in our city, formal ones. If you want to go to a large city, you've got to go to the Darebin Performing Arts Centre or something large like that. We've got nothing to that extent. We've got a wonderful Coonahan Gallery, which is a public gallery, which is something we have invested in, which Darebin doesn't have, just for example. Not sort of picking on Darebin for any particular reason, but I know about it. And we have differences between us. But this is, as the Mayor said, a state government venue that we manage for them. And I continually get disappointed when I walk past there all the time and the doors are shut and you can't go in, you can't visit, there's no one there to greet you or anything. I remember doing a radio show out the front when we were activating that space before we got an award for the landscaping that we've done there. And there are some challenges at the back of the venue. There's no green room for performers when they perform there, which is often a bit of a constraint, and there's no backstage. So it actually requires performances that go on there, on that site, to actually be fairly innovative, nimble kinds of things, and I think a lot of artists work like that. They work very lean and mean, and I think we could be seeing more of that sort of contemporary display of the arts there from our own venue. And as the Mayor said, we're going to build in an advisory. Well, the other things we're doing is building in a local advisory committee. We're looking at activating partnerships. We're wanting to see more days where it's hireable for those performers and artists who are interested in using the space, or maybe even just running local meetings there. It'd be great to see that, having more artists in residence programs. So I think these things are being worked into the arrangement so that it'll be there. But look, the contrast we're going to get between our new site being Saxon Street, which we've just renamed, and I'm just trying to make sure I get the name right, Bellum Place, is going to be a very active place where all this kind of activity is going on. And if we don't have that happening on the corner of Sydney Road and Glenline Road, it's going to look a fairly sad arrangement. So we want to see both arts places creating a real sort of buzz there, along with the gallery and other activities, music. You know, we've got music shops and all sorts of things going along Sydney Road in that stream. So this is rather exciting to see this happening, and I'm hoping that the provider, which is a youth arts focused provider, will actually be able to sort of take this on, as Next Wave are going to do that now, and actually see those sort of improvements and make it more of a community facility as much as an arts facility as well. So yeah, happy to second. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Are there any other councillors that wish to speak to this item? Councillor Bolton?
Maybe just quickly, I mean, I don't have an alternative to suggest, but I'm actually going to vote against this because I just feel some of the reasons why Councillor Riley, explained that it's not working at the moment. Like it's not accessible. The site isn't under the, to award a contract to the same, pretty sure it's the same group that is currently managing it. It's not accessible or open to the community. It's like it's always closed whenever I go past it. It's I just, it's a prime location in Brunswick. Yes, I agree. The Saxon Street site, Bellum Place, is going to be absolutely fantastic. But I really feel that the Brunswick Mechanics Institute, which is such an iconic venue, should be much more accessible to the community. And I know from reading the report, council officers have been trying to do what they can to negotiate a contract where it will be a more open and accessible venue with the same group running it. But I'm just not convinced. If they've had the contract there for so long and nothing's happened, I'm not convinced.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? I might just use my right of reply to emphasise a couple of points I made, which is, there were community concerns about it not being accessible, and that's why council officers have built in new key performance indicators for this contract that we can hold the organisation accountable to, and address if they don't open up for community to use that space. And secondly, the new kind of leadership of the organisation, and we've already seen some encouraging changes of approach since that change. So, so happy to support this. All right, we'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that division? Yeah. So division's been called. So all those in favour? Councillor Hart, Councillor Udis, Councillor Pulford, Councillor Tapanoff, Councillor Riley, Councillor Panopoulos and Councillor Davidson. All those against? Councillor Bolton. I declare that carried. We'll move on to 7.11, which is a contract for Christmas decorations. Do I have a mover? Councillor Davidson? Councillor Udis to second. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you.
And you're just to check you're moving that off the record.
I am, yeah. Thank you. So last year in November, there was a consultation with local traders and various stakeholders in our 3 major activity centres where our Christmas decorations are displayed. It's almost a conflict of interest because it's my favourite time of year, but so I always try to speak to these. But I'm very excited about the new tender that we have onboarded at Council. We have new displays that will be emerging in our 3 major activity centres, as well as along the major activity centre roads. The one that has really sparked my interest is the displays that will be at the Glenroy train station, which I believe will be interactive fixtures with a large Christmas tree. So I'm very excited to see the rollout of the new Christmas decorations and the impact that the new tender will have on our shopping strip, and the benefit of consulting with our local traders about what they liked, what they didn't like, what worked well, and how they would like Christmas decorations to invigorate the area for such a special time of year.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Udis.
Just very quickly, for all those who consistently criticise us about not spending any money during the festive season, we're spending almost $1.7 million on this, and I think we've finally acknowledged and listened, not heard the residents and or business owners. We've actually listened to, in particular, business people and or business owners. And as Councillor Davidson was saying, I'm glad that this is going ahead, and we've found a new contractor, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing more of the festive season this year.
Thank you, Councillor Udis. Do any other Councillor Bolton?
Well, it's too late to do anything because this is a proposal for a contract which has gone through a process. But there is, while I know there's financial limitations and so forth, I know there has been some controversy in Fawkner about the lack of Christmas decorations, with some residents taking it into their own hands to try and put up some Christmas decorations last Christmas, and being very dirty on the council for not providing Christmas decorations. And okay, I know that not every suburb and every shopping centre gets Christmas decorations, and the focus has always been on the major activity centres. But I think we should think a little bit about some of the smaller shopping centres. Certainly this was in Bonwick Street, where people sort of went around, you know, trying to put up Christmas decorations because they were so disgusted with council. So I just, I think we need to take those sorts of things into consideration.
Are you proposing? Oh, no.
Is it sort of too late because it's a contract? It's gone through a process, and the, you know, tenderers have tendered on a certain basis, so it's too late. But I've raised this issue before on council, but it's never gone anywhere.
Sorry, through the Mayor, could we tie in a further amendment to say that council receive a report in relation to what Councillor Bolton has put forward? So it's sort of separate, but
yeah, let's just check with the governance team on that. Sorry, didn't see you.
Mayor, just to note that I believe there was a report. There were various briefing discussions with councillors, and there was a report in March 2024 this year. And you can see in the report the resolution of council then, which resolved to continue on with scarce resources for Christmas decorations, resolved to continue on focusing on a few key areas for Christmas decorations rather than having tiny amounts of Christmas decorations spread across the municipality. Hard decision, but that report already came to council in March.
yeah, so it may look at additional spending in the future, perhaps. But
Okay. All right. So procedurally, can we accept an amendment to request a report? on the contract item? No, okay. Maybe councillors can seek to move a notice of motion if they wish to pursue that.
Okay, thank you.
Great. But yes, thanks, governance, thanks, team. All right, so I don't think we've had any, that wasn't really against it, was it? No. So any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We might move on to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. On to the next item, 7.12. It's another contract, the retaining wall reconstruction Green Bank Crescent in Pascoe Vale South. Councillor Udis to move. Councillor Panopoulos to second. Councillor Udis.
What's there to talk about this one? Just to say good. Yeah, any improvement, yeah, I'm going to support any infrastructure improvement.
Thanks, Councillor Udis. Councillor Panopoulos.
Just very quickly to add, there's a few of these types of retaining walls around Pascoe Vale South area, and it's something that, like, these walls were built a very long time ago, and we're discovering some issues, and so it's quite good to have this contract coming to us. Been a long time coming, so yep.
Thank you, Councillor Panopoulos. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We'll move to a vote. All those in favour? I can declare that carried unanimously. 7.13, contract for Wilson Avenue Streetscape Improvement. Councillor Riley, you have your hand up. Seeking to move the officer rec.
Yeah, I'll do that with a seconder.
Yeah, Councillor Yildiz to second.
Thanks, Councillor Yildiz. Look, this is another exciting contract we're awarding tonight. We began this work, I'm just trying to remember, I think it was in 2014 actually, and when we closed Wilson Avenue, which is right, it's the avenue between Sydney Road and the Brunswick, not Brunswick, Jewel Station. So it's an excellent improvement. We've got a boulder wall there, we've got some little bit of grass and some great seating, and it does get a lot of use and a lot of litter and stuff, but we have to keep looking after it. But with the new buildings that have just gone up in this street now, about 3 or 4 major medium density builds, we're really ready to actually continue to sort of improve the space, and we're going to get some great new trees. We're rearranging the parking to make it better for the locals there. And so just generally the uplift here is going to be excellent. It goes all the way around to Little Gold Street from around the Black Street intersection. And I'm really excited that we're going to be actually awarding this contract, because it's a small but important part of Brunswick South that needs it, and there's a lot of intense development going along here, as anyone living there will tell you. We hear from regularly as councillors, so we know a lot more is coming further south in terms of some of these medium density and higher rise buildings, but having this sort of extra space and greenery will be a great addition. So yeah, thanks to the officers for the work on this.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Yildiz, the seconder.
Further to my previous comments on the previous report.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Yildiz. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Councillor Bolton.
What would be great if the streetscape works could knock out those stairs so you had an accessible front entrance to Jewel Station, rather than people having to duck across between 2 blind corners to access the bike, the shed path. But anyway, I am excited about the works itself. I know council can't control those steps because it was, I think it was Metro Trains that was responsible for that, and maybe the developer. But yeah, anyway, I think the works are really needed to really create a good pedestrian walkway and a safe space, as well as an attractive space through Wilson Avenue. But I really wish we could get rid of those inaccessible steps which deter anyone in a mobility scooter or wheelchair if they're not aware you can access the shed path around the blind corner.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. You've now triggered Councillor Tapanas. Yeah.
I won't say briefly, because every time I do that, I don't adhere to it. But look, I want to sort of take you back to 2014. And those of you could remember what 2014 Wilson Avenue was like, it was a place that Victoria Police at the time described to me as an area that had the second most crime in the city. It was a place full of graffiti, full of dumped rubbish, and it was a heavy industrialised precinct. But one that did get a lot of pedestrian traffic, people coming from the train station to Berkeley Square and vice versa. Fast forward 10 years, and this space has been completely rejuvenated and reformed. There is much needed housing, including an affordable housing with the Women's Association there. There is a range of more niche sort of industries that are still there and a great contributor to the space. And there is new businesses starting to thrive. What that has meant is that there is more passive surveillance on the street. All of that petty little crime that occurred there a decade ago has more or less gone. The graffiti has gone, and it is a safe, welcoming space. And that doesn't happen by itself. The catalyst for that was the bouldering wall and that open space that was created in 2014 and this council's investment. Now we're sort of completing the puzzle. We're continuing those streetscape programs. The state has also invested, even though not perfectly, as Councillor Bolton highlighted. The state's also invested in the area. And when this is complete, you would have a beautiful, semi-pedestrianised space, new residents, new shops, passive surveillance, a safe area, and a really nice urban environment. And that is what councils can do by being innovative, by investing in local streets. And in a way, it's a little project which I hope could be replicated in other areas between Sydney Road and the railway line, fit in with the linear park that's going to be created when the elevation of the rail line happens, and create these little spaces that our community can go in and use and be proud of. So I think this is well done. I know that a lot of the residents that live there have lived through years and years and years of construction. And I want to say to them that your patience has been sort of, or will be rewarded in the end with the final outcome. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Tapper. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. So the next item, 7.14, governance report, August 2024 cyclical report. We're going to deal with this in two parts, given the potential conflict that the CEO has disclosed. So at first, we'll consider items 1 to 4 of the officer recommendation, if the officer recommendation's moved, and we'll debate and vote on those. And then we would move to consider item 5 separately, in which case, when we get to that point, I'll ask the CEO to leave the meeting. So if you do contribute to debate, please don't, at this moment, speak to item 5, because there's a potential conflict. So 7.14, do I have a councillor seeking to move a motion? Yeah. Councillor Bolton, you happy to? Oh, okay, and the extension of time. Good catch, Nick. We're also coming to the end of the first 3 hours, so we'll need to extend time by 30 minutes. So Councillor Panopoulos to move, Councillor Hart to second. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Thanks. So Councillor Bolton, you seeking to move the officer rec 1 to 4?
I'm happy to move it unless someone else wants to move it.
And second, Hart, Councillor Hart.
Okay, I mean, this is a council officer report, a governance report, sorry, which includes minutes and, includes responses to questions of council at council meetings. It includes minutes of advisory committees. It notes that the age-friendly reference group wants to be renamed Older Persons Reference Group. I'm wondering if that should be an action item as opposed to just noting. But then secondly, it notes a couple of resolutions coming out of the First Nations Advisory Committee, which which are also recommended for actioning, and these two items would be one, to approach the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung and other interested parties to organise a workshop on the treaty process to get ourselves treaty ready at a local council level, to work out how local treaty might work, and secondly, to add a new clause in the governance rules to state that notices of motion that relate to First Nations affairs must be considered by the First Nations Advisory Committee before coming to a council meeting for a vote, and a couple of other things around records of meetings, etc. So unless there's any questions, I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Hart as seconder. Sorry, Councillor, just make sure your light's on. Yeah.
Thank you. I note all the points up to point 4. I particularly just want to take this opportunity, however, to talk about point 1A, and that is the recommendation from the Age-Friendly Reference Group to be renamed as the Older Persons Reference Group. This is very important to the Age-Friendly Reference Group, and I had mentioned them earlier when we were just talking about the report, the 4-year report. I attend those meetings very regularly, and one of the things is to see the growth in that reference group, and it's very active in the sense a lot of the report, some of the projections for the future. Some of those have actually come from the reference group itself. And I think one of the important things is it's not about what does council do for us, but how do we interact with council? How do we have input? How do we have a voice within council around all the decisions that affect older people? So it's grown into a very, very active advocacy type group, and that's where the energy is, and it's beautiful to see that happen between residents, between older residents, and it's sort of, that flow that happens with officers also getting infused with projects and that whole advocacy focus. So the name change, I think, really brings a culmination to what that group has been about for a number of years. A reference group, it's a very challenging experience. People come and go, people get sick, all of those things, but to see this sort of group emerge and really try and understand what they're meant to do, how they can get involved more, and how do that make that very interactive with council, has been extremely positive. I know that they will be disappointed that this is only a mention or a note in this agenda. I think most of them thought that what would happen is that this would come to council and there would be a recommendation for a name change, would be endorsed and come into effect. I understand now this has to wait until next year and be part of another type of a process. So the reason I wanted to talk about it, because I won't be around next year, but I really wanted to make sure councillors who will be understand the importance of this, and I also want the community to understand it. So that's why I wanted to speak on it on a little bit more detail tonight and really push that does occur at the appropriate time that it's deemed that it will come to council. It's very important, and it's really part of growing an advocacy framework for older people and very much injecting that as an interactive process so that there is that consultation at all levels.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Sorry, just realised we're over time.
Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Hart.
Cheers.
Any other councillors wish to speak to items 1 to 4 of this? There was advice from the director today that it's best considered next year. So do you want to just talk to that quickly, Eamon?
Yes, through you, Mayor. So, councillors, the report recommends that the name change is noted. In terms of how that would sort of come to be in terms of changing the name of the reference group, that would occur I think it's December, when the representation on those committees at a council level is reconsidered.
The groups are coming to an end of their term, but I think, yeah, thanks, Councillor Hart, for bringing that to our attention, and it'll certainly be front of mind for the director in the next term. So we'll move on to a vote on those items. So all those in favour? This is items 1 to 4 of 7.14. Great. I declare those carried. We'll move on to discussing item 5. So the CEO will just briefly address her potential conflict of interest.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to again declare that I've got a general conflict of interest in relation to the state government consultation on code of conduct and training framework reforms, because I'm an LG Pro representative on the steering committee for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. We will invite you back after we've considered this item. So, councillors, I'll need someone to move an item. We have to decide whether yes or no we ask for a submission. If we want to make a submission, we need to highlight the points that would be part of that submission, which was discussed at our briefing. So, Councillor Riley.
I'd like to move the officer recommendation with the added part that was circulated earlier, and I thought I had it to hand.
I've got it. So,
it's
determines to not make a submission to the Local Government Reforms 2024 Stage 2 consultation process.
I'm doing that because those people who turned up to the briefing discussed this, and people can put their own submissions in. I was initially wanting us to do that, but I actually think it's probably, given Kathy's already had input into it, etc. through there, I think it's quite fine to leave it as it is, and
so you're
people
seeking
put
to
their own submissions.
I'm happy to second that.
Yeah, thanks.
So do you want to? Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah, and I don't need to speak any further. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Look, I'm happy that we don't make a submission. We're part of various peak bodies like the MAB, the VLGA, the M9, who are all contributing to that process. And as Councillor Riley said, individual councillors can do it. If councillors do want us to make a submission, we would seek, given the deadline is before the next council meeting, we would need to include the dot points that we would want officers to include in the submission. So I'm happy to support what Councillor Riley's moved. Do any other councillors wish to debate this? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? Yeah, I can declare that carried unanimously. So we'll invite the CEO back in. Thanks, Greg. So that brings us to the end of the council reports. We now enter notices of motion. So first up, we have item 8.1 on family violence, moved by Councillor Davidson. Yeah, so Councillor, you're just happy to second, Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. We know the detrimental impact that family violence has throughout our country, our state and our neighbourhoods. And for many of us, it has touched individuals that we know, and we may have experienced or witnessed it ourselves. And in this area, council has an important role to play. So this motion looks to obtain local statistics, and that might be from the local magistrates court, from Victoria Police, or from the statistics that we have available on the internet in relation to family violence that occurs within Merri-bek. From there, we can look to strengthen partnerships and forge new partnerships with various stakeholders. And these partnerships can look at practical, on-the-ground implementation of awareness and campaigns about family violence, utilising multiple platforms, including social media and community events, to educate the public on recognising the signs of family violence and what it actually looks like. Often, and I'm a lawyer and I work as a family lawyer, so often within this space, it's not really recognised, the beginnings of it, until it ends up at the police station or at the magistrate's court. So early intervention and recognition of the signs is very important. And it's only been recently that there's been significant discussion about coercive control and what that looks like and what that means, and how to recognise that within your friends or your family, and have a discussion about it, an open discussion. So with this motion, I hope that Council will have a role in helping individuals to obtain greater access and resources, and working with our stakeholders, including Victoria Police, and acknowledging the difficult tasks that they have when they intervene in this space that has predominantly happened behind closed doors in the privacy of people's homes. So I hope that this can be the beginning of some groundwork, and I also acknowledge the very formative work that Council has done, and Councillor Riley has had a significant role in looking at the ground areas where family violence springs from, and how respectful relationships have such a huge impact on future generations. So this motion looks to implement practical strategies that can attack the here and now.
Thanks, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Uders.
I know it's late. Councillor Davidson's nom, Council actively seeks state and federal government funding opportunities for training programs through community groups registered with the Council, as well as exploring other potential funding sources within our own budgetary considerations. I think that's key, and the fact that there's, it's about having a whole lot of initiatives, training programs, and they're all obviously designed to cover trauma-informed care, cultural sensitivity. I think this motion has been well put together, and I think if we can continue lobbying state and federal government to get more support, I mean, this is an area where we're always going to need, it's always going to need attention, not just in our city, but right around Victoria. But if we can be a champion in this space and get more support, how good's that going to be for the area?
Thank you, Councillor Uders. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Councillor Bolton?
Thanks for this motion, Councillor Davidson. I haven't prepared an amendment, but I did want to note a particular point, because I think in addition to, like, probably the most key issue is education about consent. I mean, there are some scary statistics about, or at least some scary statistics about attitudes of young people finding certain behaviour which is leading in the direction of either sexual violence or other sorts of violence towards women being totally acceptable. So there's that whole need for education and ramped up in terms of consent, because I think some people can recognise lack of consent in some situations, but not necessarily other situations. But the other really critical issue is housing, because housing, if people don't have anywhere to go, then that imprisons a lot of women and children in domestic violence relationships. And I know from people who work for the Orange Door Family Violence Services that often housing is the critical issue in a whole lot of situations, and that's where there's no investment in proper public housing. So people are just left at the mercy of finding vans and cars and friends who've got spare beds and so forth. But it's also especially hard if people have got children or pets or whatever. It's not just themselves that are forced to flee some of these relationships. And then you have the issue of sometimes police misidentifying who the perpetrator is, so that if a woman fights back against violence, then they're mislabelled often at the when the police are called, they're often mislabelled as perpetrators. And I know this is particularly an issue that happens with a lot of Indigenous women, where Indigenous women get locked up for resisting attacks by violent male partners. So there's sort of a lot of issues within all of this. I'm not saying council can resolve all of these issues. So, I mean, it is quite a big proposal you're putting forward, but it's an important proposal in combination with other levels of government and services.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Councillor Hart?
Yeah, just very briefly, and many thanks to Councillor Davidson for bringing this motion to council. And in bringing it to council, I think what it speaks to me about is because we have so many, we have campaigns around family violence, yet still the numbers are increasing. But it speaks to, you know, trying to explore the avenues that are perhaps unique to local government. Where can we reach people perhaps in a different way? That is, to me, one aspect that speaks from that motion. I know I have attended the group that Mark Riley is involved with, so you get some sense of what happens when you start to bring things down from, I guess, this layer, but down into a local community level of people. And the night I went, I was invited by someone who was speaking who just wanted a woman from council to be there with her because she was speaking to, you know, a mixed group and males, and she just said, "Can you come?" But I guess it was an eye-opener for me to bring these discussions to that community level. So I think it's looking for ways that local government can play a role. It's a limited role, as it is with many things, but it opens up that avenue, and I think that's what's important. I also want to acknowledge that intersection that Councillor Bolton spoke about of housing and family violence. That is just pivotal. The amount of family violence that occurs with homelessness is huge. It is massive. There's nowhere to go. There's overcrowding. There's 3 families, 4 families living in houses. It just skyrockets on top of itself. So it is also being able to see that intersection of issues. But I commend you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? We'll move on to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. On to item 8.2, the Vicky Cleary Day, moved by Councillor Tapanos and seconded by Councillor Ewers.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. And I guess this notice of motion flows on nicely from the previous one used by Councillor Davidson. It is recognising, as the previous one did, that a lot more work needs to happen here in this space, and all levels of government and local councils have a significant role to play to changing attitude and to, where possible, changing law and promoting that it's not okay to have attacks against women by men, because that's what it is. And there is a big role we can play, and I'm really pleased that that resolution now has been passed by council, and I hope this one will be as well. One of those actions, me and Councillor Riley attended the Vicky Cleary Day that's run every year by the Coburg Football Club. And even today I attended and heard Phil Cleary speak at the Fawkner Private Hospital. And it struck me that his speech as a family member of a victim of domestic violence was really powerful. It was a really powerful message, a message that needs to be heard by the whole community. And I feel that we should support the Vicky Cleary Day and support the victims, the families of victims and survivors of domestic violence, to train them and support them, to develop a pilot program here in Merri-bek where they can tell that story from their own unique perspective, from their experience, in honour of the family, loved ones that they've lost, and for those who have survived domestic violence to tell their story where they feel comfortable to do so. And I think that sends a really powerful message, and if we can take that message to football clubs, to schools, to workplaces, to every aspect of the community, we will be doing our small bit here in Merri-bek to address this issue. I want to talk about Vicky Cleary for a little bit as well, because she was a worker at Shirley Robb Children's Centre here in Coburg, a local who was stalked and stabbed to death by her ex-boyfriend because he couldn't accept that she was going to leave him in 1987. Now, back then it was different times, but the aggressive behaviour that her attacker had exhibited, I think was known, or I'm told was known by many people. And yet we have a tragic death that should have never had happened outside of one of our community centres, someone who was at work. And for that, to her family and Phil, I'm deeply sorry, and for everything that they've gone through. And it's just one example of many right across our city. We know some of the more prominent stories, whether they are Jill Maher, but there are many, many others. Right here in Merri-bek.
Councillor Tapanos.
And we need to tell those stories and empower those families to tell those stories. And I hope that this will be supported so we can develop a program together to be able to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Udis.
I concur wholeheartedly with Councillor Tapanos.
And Councillor Riley.
I just need to speak. I just want to thank Councillor Tapanos and Councillor Davidson and all the other councillors for speaking. This is about femicide. Let's call it what it is. It's about killing women, and it's men who are largely responsible for that. It's about sexism, it's about patriarchy, and it's about fixing it. And, you know, I really think these are great motions. I just need to say that because Councillor Bolton, I think, was the only one who really sort of mentioned the perpetrators being men. And while it's family violence and while it's sexual violence and domestic violence and all that, it's the men and it's how we deal with that, and we need to really, it's a difficult thing to unpick, and I know we're all trying to do it in our own ways, but, you know, let's call this what it is. This is femicide. Phil Cleary's work with the Coburg Footy Club and the work he does with sporting groups and hospitals and everything is amazing, and the number of families he gets along every year who've lost their loved sisters, aunties, mothers, grandmothers, is just astounding. And the figures we're seeing this year are just getting worse. And I think it's partly because more and more women are actually feeling like they actually can come up and speak about these things, and then we find out more and more how tragic it is and how big a problem it is. And in a first world country like Australia, we just need to really grasp this opportunity now, and I know we're all trying to do that, so I really commend this motion and the previous one. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Are there any other councillors? Councillor Bolton.
Yes, I think this is a great idea to actually look at, council doing more to publicise and support Vicky Cleary Day, but also the sort of work that Phil is doing in the community, not just in Merri-bek area, but also more broadly. I mean, certainly one thing which is really important about Phil is he has maintained his speaking out over the years in memory of his sister, but also in providing support for other families who've had their daughters, mothers, sisters, aunts murdered horrifically by their male intimate partners or other male family members. And I do remember one really great thing that Phil did when Hannah Clark in Brisbane a few years back now, I can't remember the exact year, when she and her children were brutally set alight in a car. And I remember the Prime Minister at the time said this is unusual for a good bloke or something along those lines. I can't quite remember exactly what he said. But Phil was straight out of the blocks to say, this is not a good bloke. A good bloke does not do something like this. And so he's been very consistent over the years, and for him, it's about more, it's about not just what happened to his sister, but what's happening to all women. So I think this is a really good idea. I'm glad this motion's come forward.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Any other councillor wish to speak to this item? We'll move to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. We're on to our final item. It's 8.3, short stay accommodation, moved by Councillor Panopoulos. I'm happy to second.
Are you happy to second? Great, thanks, Mayor. And yes, this is now a pivot in the conversation, but yes, I'm pleased to be moving this motion this evening. So this is not the first time that this sort of thing has come to us, and I imagine that it won't be the last. Our council has a proud track record of investigating all of the levers available to us as a council to deal with the housing crisis. So this includes joining councils such as Melbourne and Yarra to look into the impact of short stay accommodation on the supply of long-term rentals in our respective municipalities. Shortly after Merri-bek and other Victorian councils passed motions on this very issue, the state government announced a statewide levy of 7.5% on short stay accommodation. There were concerns expressed that this proposed levy would just be passed on to consumers instead of structurally making an impact in the housing market and the availability of long-term rentals. Additionally, a core aspect of properly regulating short stay accommodation would involve bringing in a cap on the number of nights that a property could be used for short stay accommodation, therefore incentivising the landlord or the landholder to make that property available for long-term rentals. In making that 7.5% levy announcement, the state government flagged that they would seek to standardise the approach that councils could take to short stays and that they would take the decision-making power out of their hands. And so it was for that reason that we put the brakes on things, and we thought that we would wait until we got some further guidance at the state level. But the thing is, significant time has passed since the announcement and there hasn't actually really been any legislative changes. I think that this is just too important for us to wait for the state government to introduce and pass legislation. And so it's really time for us to advocate once again for something to be done. And that's exactly what this motion does. So I encourage councillors to please vote in favour of it. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Panopoulos. I won't add anything further. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this item? Move to a vote. All those in favour? And I can declare that carried unanimously. That brings us to the end of our agenda. We don't have any notices of rescission. Do we have any foreshadowed items?
Mayor,
Councillor Riley?
Just very briefly, I've already lodged it, but it's to do with the Metropolitan Transport Forum's campaign on accessible public transport. I won't be around to see the impacts of this as I'm finishing this term, but I really hope that that campaign gets support from as many councils across metropolitan Melbourne, but also from rural Victoria, because anyone who comes to Melbourne is likely to use public transport, but particularly this is focusing on accessible tram stops and getting our tram system, which is one of the largest in the world, to become fully accessible. It was meant to do that last year after 20 years of federal legislation, and we failed it significantly. But look, I just want to say, I won't speak too long about it, just that it's really important work that Christian, Asturian and Councillor Bolton and many others are working on. So hopefully this will be a local government campaign ahead of the next state election, and they'll probably be coming back to you as council when I won't be here to give the money, but to resource it as well and chuck in some money with other councillors to actually really get a campaign running. Sadly, so much has gone on to tunnels, road tunnels, the most expensive road in the northwest. But
is this a norm?
But it's unlikely we're going to get it through, but it's worth it.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. We can have that debate at the next meeting. So that's all right. We're moving on to, there's no confidential business, so I'd like to declare the council meeting closed at 10:27. And thanks, councillors. Thank you, our committed ride or dies. And thank you, council officers. Good night.